This girl went to college to become a farmer because the future of the entire country depends on the land. But the mother didn't care. She was angry because of all the people. It was her daughter who cared about the future of the country. At that time, no one even imagined that a daughter who was scolded for entering an agricultural college would cause an agricultural revolution in another world. On a normal day, this girl was simply making coffee in her kitchen. And then she heard something like an explosion. She felt a strong headache, as if she was ready to lose consciousness. And then it turned out that she was in a completely different place, with dazzling lamps and richly colored flowers, people in elegant dresses and suits, and in the center of it all is a man looking at her. He said he wanted to break off his engagement with Liane. She felt a strong headache again and realized that she had remembered her past life. But now, in front of her, there still stood Crown Prince David, who now wanted to break off his engagement to her. He didn't believe that she could be really ill. He was tired of this pretense. He had suspected something was wrong from the very beginning, but he had agreed to the engagement at his father's behest. And now a worthy replacement for Liane had been found. The girl couldn't even say anything now, because these were all scenes from a novella she had read in her past life. The book was called I Became a Saint in Another World. As the title suggests, this romantic fantasy features a human from another world as the main character, and she is now standing holding hands with David. Her name is Kang Sina. As with most stories, she charmed many fans with her sweet, mysterious character. But of course, there are those who are constantly dissatisfied with the charm of the main character and regularly humiliate her. This is the typical villain, Liane Pond. And right now, in real life, she remembered her past life. This was great, of course, but Liane didn't understand why she was considered the villain. And what's worse, that even with memories from her past life, she couldn't change anything. This scene is her fiasco, when the villainous Crown Princess Liane was reduced to the status of a commoner because her fiancé abandoned her. Liane didn't understand why she was being treated like that, because she didn't even reproach Sane for her lack of manners, or make fun of her for wearing the same dress. And now the Crown Prince breaks off the engagement so unilaterally and also humiliates Liane on her 20th birthday. Today, on her birthday, David was supposed to propose to her, but instead, he dumped her. Immediately after this, she went home in a carriage, and all the way she simply cried, because the memories returned to her very late. Now that the engagement is broken, there is nothing more she can do to fix it, and at this rate, everything will go according to the scenario from the novella. Liane came home. Her father immediately met her and said that she was a disgrace to the family, so her name would be erased from the family tree. And if she wanted to say something, this was her last chance. If history is to be followed, Liane stubbornly resisted her exile and was eventually thrown out into the street by the Duke. But in this world, it is impossible to survive empty-handed, because even home visits from doctors are very expensive. That's why people without money look for shamans when they catch a disease, but the treatment from these same shamans is very disgusting. Liane had been worried about this all her life, but now, if she was expelled from her family, then without money she could not afford to get sick. The girl thought that the best solution would be to kneel right now and beg her father not to abandon her. She promised that she would be good and would live quietly, below the grass. The Duke did not expect that his daughter's last words would be exactly like that, and then such a pleasant smile appeared on his face. And with such a smiling face, he ordered Liane to be thrown out immediately. And then the gates of the house closed in front of her, and in just a couple of hours her life turned to ashes. Of course, her father didn't give her a chance to take any extra things. He didn't even give her money. So she definitely won't be able to survive without anything. There was no point in continuing to shout near the gate. It turned out that the nanny was already waiting nearby with a carriage. Liane thought that her father had taken pity and prepared a home for his daughter, but this was not the case. The Duke ordered Liane to be taken away, but her nanny could not let the lady go like that, so she decided to go with her to her homeland. Of course, the road there is long, but the ruler of those lands is very kind and it is safe to live there. Liane is at a loss. In the end, she was really thrown out. As in the original story, she did not know what to do now. The nanny tried to support Liane the whole way and said that the Duke definitely believed that she was not guilty, and in this way he simply wanted to tell her to wait patiently until the public unrest calmed down. But Liane already knew that this was not so, because in the novel Liane never appeared in the last part, which means this is her end. Left without money in her pocket, she could get sick and die somewhere in a back alley. It's too horrible. If only her memories had returned a little earlier, then maybe she could have changed something. But would she really be able to change anything to prevent Crown Prince David from abandoning her? This guy is the epitome of selfishness. He is too spoiled, noisy, and has no manners at all. But apparently, it was precisely because of his character that he fell in love with Kang Sena, a girl who dared to speak to him as an equal. Something like, "You're the first one who dared to hit me." Such men look cool in novels, but in reality, you can probably go crazy with them. Besides, even if he hadn't abandoned Liena, she would hardly have been able to live happily because she was already a puppet, and nothing would have changed. The girl decided to believe that she had found true freedom and would finally start her real life from scratch. And so, by morning, they arrived at the place. At first, Liena did not understand what it was. The nanny, with tears in her eyes, said that this was all she could do to help and apologized. Liena was grateful to this woman because the nanny had taken such a risk for her, and the Duke might be angry if he found out about it. Liena said that she would certainly repay her kindness if they ever met again, to which the nurse replied that when the lady became useful again, then the Duke would return for her. It was even more offensive to hear this from the nanny. In essence, they left Lien here for their own benefit in the future. But the girl still hoped that the nanny would never do such a thing, and so they said goodbye. Liena decided to think positively. At least she wouldn't have to sleep on the bare ground. That was good, she thought, and opened the doors of the wooden house. But it wasn't all that good. The nanny did her best to help, of course, but frankly speaking, the state of this house is too terrible. Liena is still exactly like a beggar. She was born with a silver spoon in her mouth, and in one moment she got to this point. And from the roof of this house, rainwater was dripping everywhere. Because of this, there was a lot of mold and spiders. Liena still did not despair. Life is a battlefield. She will have to do something with this ruin, in which there is not even food. But luckily, the girl recently remembered her past life. She has experience as a volunteer, so she can handle cleaning and restoring the house. And she is definitely not going to sit around and starve to death. A few months later, she was more or less able to live here. The local people still hadn't seen who lived in this dilapidated backwater. There were rumors that the Duke's daughter was here, but no one had ever seen her, and people even thought that she was already dead. But when they entered her territory, they saw a chicken next to the house. And then they noticed that this chicken looked like the one that had escaped from them just recently. Now they were sure that it was their chicken. But Liena was very close. She heard their conversation and said that it was not their chicken, because everything that ended up on these lands now belongs to her, and she would never give this chicken to her neighbors. In addition, it is a valuable source of protein. Then people finally noticed the man in rags. If this was really a lady, then she looked very pitiful, and they were very scared when this girl started approaching them. She was covered in dirt and torn clothes, but with a friendly smile, she handed them a hot sweet potato. Luckily, the climate here is quite similar to what she was used to in Korea. In other words, it is ideal for grain crops. Liena was familiar with the local plants, and the land here was fertile, so she could find food for herself. And the locals didn't even imagine that something so tasty grew in their land. No one would have thought to dig up some plant from the ground and cook it this way. Now, thanks to Liena, they learned that such potatoes grow everywhere here. Then the neighbors finally got acquainted. Liena was finally able to ask them about the price of food in this area. For example, 3 apples cost 1 gold coin, but it was too expensive. Liena had no money at all, and to get money, she decided to sell 6 sweet potatoes for 1 coin. In the end, it had been 6 years since she arrived. The adaptation was quick, and Liena had acquired a lot. Soon, the locals began to call her under the red carpet of her bright hair color. But she is not angry. She has good relations with the residents, but of course everything is not as easy as it might seem. 2 years ago, she realized that she couldn't survive on sweet potatoes alone, because people started harvesting them themselves, and Liena needed a new crop. And then she noticed that the villagers were selling the apples as soon as they were ripe, so they were no longer in very good condition. The next big thing to sell would be the beautiful apples. People here don't know the basics of farming. They don't understand how much hard work it takes to grow perfect apples. Liena worked very hard to grow apples, and of course her work was rewarded. People were shocked to see such a perfect apple. And without even hearing Liena's opinion, they immediately brought this luxurious treat to the lord of these lands. Liena hadn't given any permission yet, and they took her apple away, so she had to run after the crowd. In this confusion, the inhabitants presented the lord of these lands with a miraculous apple. The old woman was surprised that such a huge thing was an apple. It seemed as if magic was being used. Liena was a little embarrassed. Now she saw the lord of these lands for the first time. But it was also nice that someone praised her fruit so much. The girl admitted that she grew the apple herself and that she is a brilliant farmer. By her red hair, this woman immediately recognized that the daughter of the Duke of Ponda stood before her. This woman even has something about how Liena is doing here and how she is a farmer herself. Naturally, the woman thought that all this was a lie until now. The woman continued to marvel at this excellent apple, and then Liena said that she would sell it for 1 gold coin. The people were going to show it to the Lord as a gift, but Liena decided to take payment for it. After all, this apple was like her own. And the harvest this year is very small. Only 20 pieces grew. When the woman found out that there were as many as 20 of these apples, she, of course, decided to buy them all at once. And she was also surprised, because she could have paid much more for this than 1 gold coin. Liena was a very brave girl, but she didn't like gambling, so this price was quite good. To be honest, the woman, the lord, thought that her daughter would come crying to the turnover of this estate after a week, but this did not happen, so the lady also learned to grow fruit. Liena boasted about the peaches she grows, because they are the sweetest and most tender, they will melt in your mouth, and of course, she would like to grow more fruit. It sounded very tempting, and the woman could not resist this very thing, so she decided to hire Liena as a court gardener to grow fruit trees on the territory of this estate. But Liena didn't want to work for anyone. It was much more profitable for her to grow and sell fruits herself, so she, of course, refused. The woman did not understand how Liena would cope with everything alone, and she had no one else to rely on. That is why Liena advised this lady to invest in her business, as well as provide protection and support. The lady liked this confidence very much, so she immediately agreed and trusted the lady. Liena immediately sold all her apples for 20 gold coins, and the next year she grew peaches and sold them for even more. In just 1 year, its fruits became so famous that lords from neighboring lands began to talk about them, offering sponsorship and acquisition deals. Liena bought land, hired workers, and started raising livestock, so her life can be called a stunning success, which she is happy with. It was definitely worth it. She had already achieved such success in 6 years, and now the grandmother lord said that, having so openly rejected Lady Liena, Crown Prince David recently married, he became king. If it weren't for his frivolity, Liena could have become a queen now. But fortunately, she is happy with what she has now, and the fate of the crown prince does not interest her at all. Liena loves farming too much to worry about such things. She has decided to spend this life as a successful farmer. The harvest this year was even greater than the previous one, and Liena sold the fruit in the neighboring village as well. Another time when she was just walking around the area and thinking about what to plant next. She accidentally tripped and fell. It was very painful. Turning around, she tried to find out what happened. She tripped over the hoe. It had perfectly straight lines and gracefully flowing. It is a very rare tool, so finding it here was pure happiness. Liena never thought she would come across a hoe in this world. Here, everyone uses flower trowels for farming, but now they will not be needed when there is such a convenient tool. Liena fell in love with it immediately, only then suddenly she began to hear someone's voice and saw a glow from this hoe. In her past life, she would have been shocked if she suddenly started talking. But in this world, magic is not that rare. Having a perfect adaptation to this world, Liena is no longer surprised. Moreover, she cannot let go of the valuable talking hoe. After 4 years of farming, the hoe asked, "Are you my new master?" Liena said, "Yes." At that moment, magic surrounded her from all sides. It was a very powerful flow of power, so the girl did not understand what was happening. Then she heard a voice that said that the contract was made, and some kind of mark appeared on her hand. Suddenly, this hoe turned into a beautiful sword, and its name is Liu Garbong Bontoir. Liena became its 10th master, and this should be an honor for her. However, looking back, she realized that she should have thrown away that hoe when it first spoke. If Louis were to retell the story of his creation, 10 houses would not be enough, so he briefly said, "He is a sword forged by the god of abundance Bonarakel in 3 days and 3 nights. Abundance is part of the sword, so many wanted to get it. But Louis is extremely demanding sword, so he allowed only those who were destined to become emperors to wield him. But 9 times was enough. At some point, more and more unskilled people tried to become his masters, so Louis got so tired that he hid and became a humble hoe on the farm. While he was telling the story, Liena was trying to somehow erase the magic circle on her hand. And Louis was telling how glad he was that the master was able to recognize the true essence hidden under this modest form, and her eyes were able to see the beautiful flower buried in the dirt. Liana simply understood him because he was a hoe. And now she's even upset that it is some kind of talking object. Louis claimed that Liana had the quality of a ruler, so he even blessed her. But Liana was sure that he had made some mistake, because she was an ordinary farmer and did not even know how to hold a sword. Louis didn't care who she was. He had been in this form for a long time, searching for a suitable master, and he had finally found one. Liana had wise and humble eyes, suitable to become Louis's master. Liana, however, was delighted, because she just wanted to take care of her farm. Well, with the hope that she wouldn't be bothered by this talking sword, in this world it's nothing special, she had already resigned herself to it. Louis was very boastful, but Liana has no family and is bored, so he can become her conversationalist. Only Louis went a little overboard. He wanted his master to entertain him until he became old and gray. After some time, Liana went to have tea with her grandmother and brought some delicious fruits. They discussed how suddenly the trees and firewood had started to grow very actively recently. Sun rays, the weather is really good. This year it seems like God is helping, but it turned out not only on the plants. And also, when a dog gives birth, she always has 8 puppies. And when a hen lays eggs, they always have 2 yolks. Now, people are looking for eggs without double yolks for treatment. Some people find it strange, but it is still good to live surrounded by abundance. Liana was just happy with the day. Her grandmother was much more careful than she saw anything strange in this. Then she noticed that Liana's hand was bandaged. The girl said that it was not a wound. It was just an incident, but everything was fine. Grandma was curious to know more about it, so Liana simply said that she got a strange tattoo while walking around the farm, and to avoid attracting attention, she bandaged her arm. She showed her grandmother this mark, and the woman suddenly got a headache. She told her to hide this tattoo and leave early today. Grandma wasn't the type to send people away just because she wasn't feeling well, so something had gone wrong. Liana returned home, still thinking about what had happened. She decided to have a little chat with Louis and improve their relationship. Now he was very angry, or rather, even upset, and all because he knew how Liana used another sword. He meant the knife she used to cut the melon. That was already treason. Liana couldn't carry a weapon in front of her mistress, so she had to leave Louis. He would have been more upset if she had shown it in the hands of a guard or left it on the ground. In all this time, no one had dared to treat him like that. Liana didn't want to leave him in such a mood, so she started complimenting Louis. He is, of course, narcissistic, so he immediately felt better. Liana promised that next time she would definitely take it with her and brag to everyone about how cool it was. The soul of this sword seemed to be a truly living being, and he made her make a promise. This sword not only can speak, but can also change its shape freely. It also emits light like a flashlight. Liana thought the shape of the hoe was the best, but it was a shame for the sword. He said that everything that is happening in this area now, the cattle are giving birth to many offspring, and the fruits and grains are bringing in abundant harvests, is all thanks to his blessing. He is created with the utmost devotion by the God of abundance, and the land where he lives produces crops and livestock multiplies. Liana didn't really believe it, but she agreed with what Louis was saying. It was getting dark, so she had to go quickly and check the field with the harvest. Louis flew around and insisted non-stop that he was the right hand of the rulers. When there is a lot of food, people will gather, and naturally, state names are formed. So the ancestors have been creating civilizations on rich lands since ancient times. Suddenly, someone knocked on the door of the house. Liana heard a male, unfamiliar voice. In addition, there was no one who would come at such an hour, so she tensed up. There was glass and a curtain on the front door, so she could see that there was not one, but several strong young men standing there. It seemed suspicious, and Louis was happy. He wanted to show off his skills as soon as possible and wash this passage with a sea of blood. Liana immediately made it clear to him that he would not have such an opportunity, but still asked the sword to stay close and not move until she called it. Liana plucked up her courage and opened the door. This guy, when she saw him with her own eyes, she was shocked, because he was a real handsome man. The first thing he said was, "I found you, cat thief." His choice of words was completely at odds with his elegant face and clothes, which simply mesmerized Liana. Because of this, she herself did not immediately realize how she said, "Aren't you my little kitten?" It was a stupid question in response to this guy's equally stupid words. Everything was fine in the neighboring empire. But one day, the empress suggested the emperor to get a divorce. This had never happened before, so he was shocked and did not want to get a divorce. But the empress was not afraid to be first. However, she would not have minded being first in another sense. For example, being the first wife who is unable to endure the tedious process of divorce and kills her husband. After that, she thought that her existence would be forgotten. Besides, she moved far away after the divorce. But after so many years, her grandson, the current Emperor Cayman Marshall, came to visit her. Now she lives on these lands, but her grandson, of course, still considers her an empress, although this has long been the case. Grandmother hoped that the emperor would treat her as a simple Lady Aurelian. Cayman said he really enjoyed the fruit his grandmother sent him, although he didn't immediately realize that the fruit was a gift brought by Bonera's blessing. Grandma wanted to send Liana's fruits to her children because they looked beautiful, but of all things, such a misunderstanding occurred. The sacred sword disappeared, and from the imperial palace, simultaneously with the divorce of the empress, and it also became clear that in Poston there was an unusually offensive harvest. And of course, the emperor does not believe that these two events have nothing to do with each other. Grandmother was absolutely not ashamed of anything. She was honest the day she gave up her name Marshall. She left everything in the imperial palace and took nothing. The sword the emperor spoke of is not currently in her possession, but she admitted that one of her rebels had a contract with that sword. Cayman couldn't believe it and interrogated his grandmother. Yes, it was rude, but Grandma told the truth. The person who became the owner of this sword is called Liana, and she is a simple farmer. That's why Cayman went to her house right after receiving this information to find out everything personally. Liana still didn't understand why these people came to her, and besides, the guy's clothes showed that he was of high status, but he spoke to her respectfully. And had he mentioned something about a cat before? The situation was very strange, but Liana was actually glad that such a handsome guy called her kitten. Whatever the matter was, she was going to listen to this guy. She believed that this guy was not a criminal who broke into the house of a lonely girl. When she said this, the real knight behind her started yelling at her for being so impudent. But they came to her at such an hour, Liana was not going to treat them politely. Because of this, the knight merged even more. But with one movement of the guy's hand, he fell silent, which once again confirmed his high status. Liana wanted to ask a lot of questions. She was curious about who it was and why he was looking for her. But she was not going to give in to provocation on the stairs. This guy said that he was the owner of the ball, which was now in her hands, and he came to return this sword. Liana was shocked. It turns out that Louis has another owner and he lied to her. Louis immediately said that this was not true, and only she was his owner. The situation was unclear. Liana didn't know which of the two to believe, but this guy's face looked very truthful. Cayman didn't understand why this girl was talking to a sword. After all, he himself had never heard Louis' voice. Liana didn't understand. The guy claimed to be the owner of the sword but didn't know about it? The guy knew that this sword had a will, but never spoke to it. Liana decided to check and asked, "Is this sword very quiet and calm?" And the guy said that it is, and so it turned out that he was lying. Liana asked what he really wanted, and if he lied now, she would never open that door again. The guy said his name was Cayman, and that he was the grandson of Lady Aurelian. Liana didn't even know a person with that name. She didn't care. Only then did the guy say that the name of the lord of these lands was Aurelian. Liana immediately realized that this was her grandmother. Having spent several years together at tea parties, she asked to call her grandmother. So Liana even forgot about the name. So, Cayman said that this sword is a very valuable item that can only be used by the head of their family. And after the grandmother was born and left, the sword also disappeared. Louis even started to get a little nervous. He didn't want to tell the truth, but he didn't deny it either. Cayman said that he would properly compensate for the loss of the sword. Liana understood the situation. But even if she wanted to give up the sword, Louis simply would not leave her alone. He flew around at night, crying and begging her not to leave and not to give him up. He wanted to live next to Liana until his hair turned gray. It was the first time people had seen the sword move on its own, but it confirmed that Liana was the sword's true owner. Louis was very offended. This family really considered him their heirloom, but they would never truly care for him. They don't even know his real name. Liana decided to check it out and asked Cayman what the real name of this sword was. But he didn't remember. He only knew Louis, and yet he dared to admit that he was its owner. What a shame. Now anyway, since it wasn't his sword, Liana couldn't give it to Louis and asked those men to leave. However, Cayman couldn't leave so easily. After all, the value of this sword's symbolism is much greater than what an ordinary person can imagine. Cayman needs to get this sword, even if he has to use a slightly devious method. This sword has its own will anyway. Liana couldn't give it up if he didn't want it. Cayman insisted that the sword was a weapon, and only the will of the young lady was important. Cayman did not want to use it on such a fragile girl, even if he was the most powerful man in this world. He asked, would she really say no? Liana stuck to her opinion. It was the final decision. Cayman suddenly came very close to her. It was so embarrassing. Apparently, this is really the insidious method he talks about. But Liana, not letting him get any closer, stopped him straight away, called him her little kitten again, and asked him to be careful with what he was doing. Liana was sure that he was going to propose a marriage of convenience to her, but such a thought did not even enter his head. But then he thought, if he married this girl, the property would be jointly owned, and this is the only legal way to co-own this sword. He is an emperor, and he did not even think of this. And some farmer girl immediately understood. It would have been better if she hadn't given him such an idea because right after that, Cayman proposed to her. He didn't look like he was lying, he was leaving. And so he had to get a proposal of marriage, still nice, from the crown prince. Liana never got it. All that was missing now was a huge bouquet of flowers. His proposal is too insensitive and he should at least get down on one knee. Well, following her advice, he immediately did everything as it should be. Liana looked at him with delight for a few seconds. And then, with a smile on her face, she simply refused his offer. And then, without giving him time to react, she walked straight through the door in front of him. The emperor himself and the knights were in great shock from such behavior. Then they even began to scream. But Liana simply ignored it and went about her business. In any case, she was not going to leave the house today. Cayman was completely fooled. He felt as if he had been bewitched. A round face and that wavy red hair, a tight-fitting, modest straw hat and small brown eyes. But this appearance does not at all correspond to the actions of this girl. The emperor has never been made fun of like this before. After that, he went to his grandmother's mansion. Although he should have gone home, he decided to stay there for a while. Grandmother was sure that the emperor would immediately take Liana with him to the empire. But in the end, he fell for her tricks. Cayman told how this impudent girl convinced him that the only legal way to get hold of the weapon was marriage, and insisted on the proposal. Grandmother was surprised. She, of course, knew that Liana was a brave girl, but she didn't even think that she would dare to propose something like that to the emperor. And she was even more surprised when she found out that Cayman had proposed to her, but Liana had slammed the door right in his face. Cayman couldn't go back empty-handed. His pride wouldn't allow it, so he decided to woo Liana, and now it was getting more and more interesting. The man who had always followed the objective path, known for his cold and indifferent nature, was now reveling in emotions like this. Perhaps it was too careless to assume that something romantic was brewing, but at least spring would come for Cayman. Grandmother had hoped for that, and besides, she treasured her grandson and Liana very much. After 2 days of hiding with a suspicious blonde, Liana had a dream. She saw a mountain spirit. He asked her a riddle. Yellow, soft and sweet. What could it be? Liana immediately realized it was a pumpkin and woke up. What a ridiculous dream. But it got Liana thinking, pumpkin is so delicious, with a soft texture and sweet taste, it would be very interesting if added to noodles. The hour had struck. Liana confidently decided to defeat all enemies and enjoy the harvest, so she told Louis to get ready. Sword thought that by harvest she meant collecting the heads of her enemies and displaying them to everyone. Louis really wanted that. But it was too grim a harvest. Liana had put on some shabby clothes for the battle and didn't tell Louis what they were going to do until the very end. Then she explained to Louis in detail what shape it should take, which was a first for him. It took the form of a perfect, handy pair of garden shears with a very sharp blade. Louis was upset that his mistress had deceived him, and now he had to be just a pair of scissors and the juice was running down him, and it was very sticky. Liana just laughed at this. Louis had always been washed in blood, but now they were so disgusted by plant juice. Suddenly, Cayman was nearby. He heard Liana's voice, so he was able to find her and offered his help to carry these pumpkins. He hoped that the sword would be with the lady, but he thought he was wrong. And then he noticed that these strange scissors in her hands were too perfect. And then he realized that this was the sword of self-love. Liana pretended that Louis really enjoyed serving her like this and helping her, although it didn't seem like Louis agreed with it. Cayman, one of those same obsessed men, is going to save this sword and along with it, take the lady for himself. Liana and Cayman took several boxes of pumpkins to the warehouse because they had to wait about 20 more days, and then they could raise the price and sell these pumpkins. Cayman helped her, so in gratitude she decided to treat him to a very tasty dish, a lunch blessed by the mountain god. The emperor saw such food for the first time and thought that all commoners ate it, but only Liana could cook it. This soup was very unusual and strange, but at the same time so delicious that Cayman could not stop. Liana simply enjoyed this guy's handsome face while he ate, and then brought him some homemade tea to drink. She had never shared this aroma with anyone before, but she decided to offer it to such a handsome man. Liana dug an ice cave because she often gets hot and now she can make ice, so she puts it in her tea. Cayman was surprised that such a girl could dig a cave with a shovel. He told her to ask for help next time, but such tricks won't work on her. She has no need to ask for help if she can do something herself. This made Cayman smile. After all, she was quite unusual, and the person was becoming more and more interesting to him. A few years ago, a black-haired angel descended to Earth in the kingdom of Barker. Some people considered her a demon, while others insisted that they should express their respect and reverence to the guest. Many sought to use her for political purposes, but in the end, the girl fell in love with the crown prince and became engaged to him. Now she is the crown princess. However, life does not end with falling in love. Kang Sina rushed into the office to talk to David. Once her face had enchanted him, but now he was irritated at the sight of Sina. He told her not to let anyone into the office, but she came anyway. Sina was very unhappy that David began to avoid her. She couldn't even remember the last time they had a normal conversation. But David didn't see that she wanted to talk to him normally because she was acting too emotionally and constantly shouting, causing problems. She recently became angry because he danced with Lady Althair. And before that, she was upset because he didn't give her the mermaid she really wanted. Sina actually blamed him for all this because he wanted to make that lady his concubine, and as for the mermaid's tear, it now adorns the neck of the princess of the neighboring kingdom, and of course Sina was upset. David explained to his bride many times that the position of queen is a very important political tool for the king, and he gave this title to her, so she cannot demand so much from him. Sina could not accept such a cowardly excuse. She has no one here except her fiancé, she has no family and friends, only David. And now she is going to gather concubines like a flower bouquet for the sake of politics. David believed that he was right in this situation, because for the king there is nothing more important than politics, but Sina still called it another excuse. In the end, David only proved his impotence. Even now, instead of calmly talking and discussing, he simply kicked Sina out of his office with the help of guards. The girl did not understand what had happened to her beloved. He was a wonderful man who swore eternal love, and now he was collecting a harem of concubines and behaving in this way. I didn't know what to do because there was nothing like that in the novel. David didn't know what to talk about with Sina. She constantly mentioned some serious conversation, but this only happens if people hear each other. The crown prince was already busy with many problems, and now he was reaping the fruits of the conflict with Duke Pond. In an attempt to strengthen their sacred authority, the cathedral recognized Kang Sina as a saint, and because of this, a marriage contract was hastily adopted, and the crown prince decided to betroth to her. David was sure that Duke Pond would beg to accept Liana as a concubine in the palace. But this did not happen, and events took a completely different turn. The Duke rejected his daughter, calling her a disgrace to the family and earning the recognition of society. The prince could not even imagine such a thing. Not only did Liana lose her title as crown princess, but she was also abandoned by her father, who relies on the support of the nobility. The Duke joined the second prince's faction with the help of the public, and now he poses a threat to the crown prince. Moreover, David increasingly, after a quarrel with his fiancée, began to think that Liana had never behaved like this. And then the day came when he began to miss her. So he ordered his men to find Liana, but they searched the entire duchy and never found the girl, which irritated the prince greatly. It seemed to him that the Duke was trying to deceive everyone, but it turned out that he really had thrown out his daughter. And now the prince began to worry about how a woman who only knew how to embroider could survive among the common people. After the engagement, Sina was of no use, so there was no point in keeping her as crown princess. David began to wonder what would happen if Liana were restored to her position as crown princess. Then Duke Pond will again take the crown prince to his side, and the lady, disgraced by her family, will fall at David's feet with tears of gratitude. He thought it was a brilliant plan, so he ordered Liana to be found as quickly as possible. Cayman kept thinking about Liana. She was so strange. And what could she do with those hands that looked like they could break from one touch? And she also said that she dug an ice cave? It was very difficult to imagine how she had done it alone. And that was why the emperor had been thoughtful and silent all day. To store ice, you need to put it in the refrigerator. But ice is something that cannot be purchased for any amount of money. It is provided by the sorcerers from the Magic Tower. It is unlikely that any ordinary person is familiar with food sources and knows how to get ice without magic. You need someone who can give advice from their own experience, like Lena. As soon as that name appeared in Cayman's head, he really saw Lena in front of him. She didn't expect to meet him so suddenly, she just came to her grandmother, and her grandson, it turns out, also lives here. Lena, did you notice the abrasion on Cayman's beautiful face? It must be because he stood in the blazing sun all day without a hat, and now he has burns. Lena had brought something with her just for this occasion. Although such scratches can be quickly healed with a healing potion, you can simply not spend money on it. Lena took something out of the fruit basket and smeared it on Cayman's face. She said it was a cool aloe, and it worked great on burns because of its cooling effect. Her grandmother has a similar plant at home called agave, but Lena doesn't know the difference. That's what she's going to try to find out now. The Emperor drew conclusions from his interactions with the common people who were developing their wisdom for the sake of survival. He asked if Lena had received this knowledge from her parents. She said that she had no parents. But then I saw the guy's shocked face and realized that I had expressed myself incorrectly, so I had to explain everything. She has parents, but she is not their biological daughter, and besides, they abandoned her. Cayman froze when he heard this and didn't know what to say. He seemed like a good person, so Lena told him a little about her life. She was adopted at a young age and abandoned by her family after an embarrassing broken engagement. But living alone wasn't so bad. Lena is happy with everything and is living her best life right now. She can freely do whatever she wants. Cayman was interested in knowing more. It was written right on his face, but he politely decided not to ask about it. It was so sweet of him that Lena laughed and even stroked his face. It was only later, when he blushed, that she realized that she shouldn't have gotten so close so quickly, and the atmosphere between them was very strange at that moment. Grandma wanted to see what all the fuss was about and went out into the corridor, but she didn't expect to see Lena and Cayman. Just by looking at these little rascals, it was immediately clear what was going on between them. Grandmother approached Lena and the Emperor. Even though he was her grandson, she always called him Your Majesty. But now he asked her to address him as her grandson in a hint. Grandma immediately realized that he still hadn't told Lena that he was the Emperor. Not only did they meet, but they also ate together. She also put some medicine on his face. You could say they were already close, but she still didn't know who he really was. The grandmother decided to help these young people and said that it was better to remove all this formality and talk without formalities. After all, they were the same age and could become good friends in this quiet town. The Emperor did not understand how this was possible, because mutual respect was necessary, so he treated everyone with respect. But as soon as Lena found out that they were digging together, she said that it was fate, and immediately forgot about all formalities, calling Cayman by name. Grandma and Lena were obviously laughing at him. Cayman was a little embarrassed, but still decided to agree with them. Lena suggested that they try watermelon. She herself put different fruits in the watermelon, added juice, ice, berries, and it turned out very beautiful. The Emperor and the grandmother saw such beauty for the first time and could already imagine how hard it was for Lena to carve all these figures out of fruit. Lena didn't reveal what trick she used to do this because in reality she made Louis take on different forms, even though he hated it. Cayman couldn't believe that Louis didn't help with this and continued asking questions. Lena just wanted to shut him up, so she pricked a fruit heart and shoved it right into Cayman's mouth. Of course, he was embarrassed that she did this, but then he was surprised. The fruit was so sweet. Or maybe it was sweet because Lena gave it to him. Either way, this watermelon was sweeter than any other. At first, Cayman thought it was just a coincidence, but now he is convinced that the property is different. Perhaps it is due to the difference between the cultivation method in the Empire and here. Before meeting Lena, the Emperor had only thought about how to defeat the nobility in their pursuit of the crown and strengthen the imperial power. He had never been a worker, and the lives of the common people did not interest him. What was the food he ate made of? And now, he felt ashamed of it. He also tried something new today. Lena made grape juice from the leftovers and said it was delicious and healthy. Cayman didn't understand how it could be delicious, since the leftovers had no value on the market. But Lena took it much more simply. Even if the leftovers had no value, it didn't mean the juice was bad. Just as much love and effort went into it. The same thing happens with people. A person's value can be reduced by bad rumors or malicious slander, but his essence will not change. At first, Cayman was just going to take the sword, but now he's wondering why he chose Lena as his master. Cayman would really like to talk to her more. As she left the mansion, she waved to Cayman. He was on the balcony, but even from afar, Liana shone so brightly. Cayman's heart began to beat faster and his face turned red. Cayman heard it, but he didn't want to admit it. Liana walked home calmly with a full basket. Grandma had packed her salmon, ham, and so many other seasonings, and Liana loved her grandmother very much for that. And Grandma always praises the food very generously, so Liana comes to her very often. This woman is really honest and does not spare words about what she likes. Liana happily returned home, thinking about what she would cook from this salmon. Suddenly, Louis ran up to her right on the street. He was furious that they were having fun without him. Liana promised that she would take the punch and come home right away, but in the end it was already approaching midnight. She had deceived him. Liana really forgot about time and now she is very disappointed. And he also didn't want Liana to get close to that bastard Cayman. She didn't understand why. Louis had told her how cruel the Marshall family was. At first they would be nice to whoever they wanted, as long as they were treated to good food and funny stories. But once their interest faded, they would take Louis, even if it meant cutting off Lian's arm. Liana heard the name Cayman for the first time, and it sounded very familiar. But she had not been out in high society for so long that she could no longer remember who that name belonged to. Basically, Louis told her to never be without her loyal protector and not to fall for tricks and appearances because the Marshall family are real demons. Liana pretended to believe it. She asked Louis if he had decided to stay with her forever. After all, there was nothing like cutting enemy heads in her life. Louis didn't care. He wanted to serve only the master he had chosen, but it seemed as if he was not telling the whole story. Liana thought that he had a much more suffocating reason for running away from home. He had been flying calmly all the way, but now he suddenly hid, pretending to be an ordinary sword. 3. Liana didn't understand why, and then she saw that a nanny had come to her house. They hadn't seen each other for many years. 4. The nanny didn't expect to run into Liana like that and thought that she was still living in the house that the nanny left her. Liana didn't want to live in that wreck. That house needed repairs anyway, and it would have been easier to just move out. 5. Liana is glad to see the nanny after so much time, but she has some unpleasant feeling because the nanny has never visited her in all these years. So why did she come now so unexpectedly? 6. Liana even kindly offered the nanny a choice of teas, but reminded her that the nanny liked chamomile. 7. When the tea was ready, the nanny had already managed to look around. Even by the type of cup and the state of the house, it was clear that Liana was living well. 8. The nanny was sure that it was the lord of these lands who had rescued Liana several years ago, and it was probably all thanks to her, because she too had been struggling with her long-term situation after the divorce. So she could take pity on the broken and abandoned lady. 9. Liana said that the nanny was wrong and that the grandmother had no interest in this. Liana survived only by her own efforts and lives alone. 10. I still didn't believe it and thought that Liana was lying because she was just a lady who wasn't even capable of earning money. It was very rude, not open, and looked down on Liana, deciding that she had no need to be polite since she was no longer the Duke's daughter. Liana was not going to tolerate such an attitude. She said that this chamomile tea cost 1 coin, and the nanny wants to believe it or not. She behaved inappropriately and did not even acknowledge the efforts. Liana had nothing to talk about with such a person, so she said not to leave. The nanny asked for at least 1 minute. She came to tell that the Duke had ordered Liana to be returned home. This was very shocking news. The nanny told how hard it was for the Duke after Liana left, and that he was beside himself with thoughts about whether something had happened to her. But it was too obvious a lie. Now he just suddenly came up with a new use for Liana, and it's not a concern. But Liana doesn't care about it anymore. She doesn't care about her family and she doesn't want to see them. So she told the nanny to just leave. Well, she didn't leave, but she said she would report this to the Duke and also pass on the lady's wit. Liana ended by saying that she cursed the Duke from the top of her head to the tips of her toes. After that, she was finally left alone, but after such a sudden guest, she did not feel very well. The next day, Cayman contacted his sister Reese via a magic ball. She was interested in when he was going to return, since she had not stopped entertaining the emperor for so long in foreign lands. After the divorce, the grandmother returned to her homeland, but no one had any idea what was in store for her. So the state granted her the lands of Poston, a borderland adjacent to the empire. The former emperor missed his wife with all his heart. It took him a lot of effort to create a sleepy teleportation that connected the two regions, and back then, no one could have imagined that it would be useful in today's times. Cayman shouldn't have spent the night in Poston and could have simply used the teleport. But he didn't. And now he was ashamed in front of his sister and Susan. Reese gave only 2 reasons why her brother would be allowed to stay in Poston. Either he was busy convincing the sword, or he had fallen in love for the first time in his life. Cayman said that this was definitely not the case, which is why his sister made him return to the Empire faster. Although in reality, Liena does not leave his thoughts even during meetings. One of the knights reported to the Emperor that something strange was going on in Poston. Some visitors had been spotted at Lady Liena's house, and it seemed they were keeping a close eye on her. Besides, the other day she was seen off by some maid who, as it turned out, was connected with the observers. But what are they trying to achieve with such surveillance? According to Lady Aurelian, these people may be related to Lady Liena's ex-fiancé. As soon as Cayman remembered what she had said about her ex-fiancé, he immediately became angry. How could she have the nerve to come back after her fiancé had so easily abandoned her and disgraced her? Besides, Liena had blossomed as a farmer. Cayman immediately put aside all his business and decided that he had to save Liena. He went to her house. They agreed to be friends, but would those friends really have anything to do with a friend's ex-fiancé? Cayman didn't know who Liena's ex-fiancé was, but he imagined him kneeling and apologizing once he learned the Emperor's title. Cayman started to look for an excuse. Why was he so angry about this? And he came up with the idea that if Liena was kidnapped, the sword would disappear along with her. It was imperative to control this situation. So he had good intentions. What if this scoundrel takes Liena away by force, or, even worse, will tearfully beg for her return, realizing her full value? At first glance, Liena seems resilient, but in her soul, she suffers from loneliness. Cayman couldn't let this happen, so he quickly ran to her house and went to check out the situation. When he approached the door of her house, he heard a loud scream, so he simply walked in without knocking. Liena screamed and asked for help because the boards from the ceiling suddenly started falling. In the end, thanks to his help, she was able to replace this part of the ceiling and fixed everything herself. This 85-year-old house had a renovated corner of the ceiling. The answer was that the boards were falling apart and bugs were crawling out of the rotten wood. It was a very nasty sight. Liena has already torn out the damaged part, but she still has new boards to replace it, so there is no need to worry. Cayman was surprised to learn that Liena usually does all the repairs herself. She can't hire a carpenter because there is no professional carpenter in this village. And even if there was a carpenter here, it would be strange for a lonely girl to invite him home. Liena copes with repairs herself after a long time of independent living, and Cayman has not yet seen the ruins in which she lived before. That house was falling apart. Liena had to swallow the roof with straw and build a fence, and it was very annoying. The nanny seemed to be jealous of the well-being, so she would be content with Liena's difficult situation. By the way, Liena used Louis as a hammer again. He, of course, did not like that he was used as a tool, but Liena always gave him enough compliments and gratitude. And yet, Louis's hammer still wasn't the best choice, so it suddenly started flying off to the side. It was unexpected, and Liena ended up accidentally falling right on top of Cayman. She hadn't felt someone else's warmth for a long time, but now, facing him so close, she felt warmth. And thanks to his big body, she didn't get hurt, so of course she thanked him. And he was so glad that she wasn't hurt, and even stroked her hair. Liena was so embarrassed she immediately blushed and noticed the atmosphere that arose between them. The man she used to make fun of was close to becoming a man in her eyes. Liena had completely forgotten that this guy was incredibly handsome, and now that his face was so close, she just couldn't stop looking at him. After going through all the points, he turned out to be an ideal husband candidate in every sense. Liena immediately decided to move away from him. And besides, she blushed so much that he began to worry and follow her. He took her hand, but Liena felt that at this rate she would die from arrhythmia. She had a small cut on her arm from the fall, and Cayman was very good at bandaging, so he offered to help her. As a duke's daughter, Liena had been in this situation before, but for some reason her heart was beating so fast right now. Cayman was worried and concerned about her. When he helped her bandage her arm, he was about to leave, but she offered him lunch before leaving. Even here, he showed concern. He didn't want to burden the wounded person, so he left anyway, but told her to contact him if she needed help again, because it was not necessary to take everything on herself. Louis flew to the master, and he apologized for what happened. Louis completely forgot how weak Liena was compared to him. But Liena, on the contrary, was very grateful to him now. So much so that she even kissed him, because thanks to her, She had the chance to fall into the arms of a wonderful man. Cayman is so beautiful that the loser David can't hold a candle to him. He has a nasty character and a face like a dried squid. But Cayman only wants Louis. That's why he proposed on their first date. It's all for Louis. But even if he uses seduction tactics, he's too handsome to resist. Liana was beginning to understand why emperors throughout history had indulged in beautiful people. But she still felt bad that he had left with an empty stomach, so she decided to make him some kind of sandwich with potatoes. Louis casually asked Liana, "What if this man turned out to be an emperor?" Liana just laughed. Cayman really was good enough to be an emperor. It would be a crime not to be the main character with a face like that. Louis was about to say that he really was the emperor, but suddenly someone knocked on the door. It was already late, and Liana thought that it was Cayman who had returned, and yet he could not live without her food. She happily opened the doors, confident that she would see her friend, but suddenly her face changed. It was already night. Cayman was still working. No matter how much he worked, his work never ended. But even while working, he constantly recalled the situation that happened today, and because of this, his head was in a mess. The grandmother came to the emperor at such a late hour. She brought him something to eat because she thought that he might be hungry. Cayman didn't understand why his grandmother brought him sandwiches, since he was planning to go to bed soon, and this was a full meal. She told him to just try it and then complain. And when he tried it, he was surprised. It was very tender and delicious. Grandmother heard that the emperor had helped Liana today, and taking advantage of the moment, he asked, "Do all commoners always dump all the work on themselves? After all, when you have money, you can delegate it to someone else." And Grandma said it was very dangerous for a woman living alone to claim to have money, and it was admirable that Liana was managing everything on her own. In gratitude for her help, Liana brought these potato sandwiches, but she looked a little pale. Cayman started to worry about this. He told Liana to rest more, but she doesn't listen. He decided to visit her tomorrow and thank her, and at the same time check how her wrist was doing. Just thinking about her made his face turn slightly red, and a smile appear on his face. Cayman realized that he was just looking for an excuse to see her, but suddenly he heard a noise. The windows immediately came to their senses, and he thought it was a mercenary. He was already ready for battle, but he saw that Louis' sword was outside the window. He flew and tried to say something, but Cayman could not hear the voice of the sword spirit. However, he understood that something urgent had happened, and it was probably connected with Liana. She was lying at home in the meantime and felt bad. After only one meeting with that person, it was bound to happen, but the stress was inevitable. Liana had hopes because this was still a family. But when she saw her father on the threshold, she still let him into the house, as well as her nanny. My father said that all this time he felt himself fading, having lost the peace of mind about Liana. But he looked as if he hadn't changed at all. Liana didn't understand what was happening now, and besides, this wasn't in the original story. Kang Sena got engaged 2 years after coming to this world, and then, after marrying David, this story ended. But things got weird from the start. Unlike the original, Sina got engaged right after coming here, and Lian was dumped even though she hadn't done anything evil. For some reason, everything sped up too much, and Liana didn't remember the story itself very well, so she assumed that this story was after the denouement. Liana should have died, unable to bear their difficulties here, but she is alive. And now, here was a man who didn't care whether she lived or died. The Duke certainly wasn't worried about Liana, because he had 5 more daughters to marry. Her father still tried to pretend that he was afraid that helping her would anger the royal family, and fortunately, his assumptions were correct. She meekly accepted her punishment, so the prince took pity on her, and now Tina is looking for her. He remembers her gentle and submissive nature. Liana immediately realized that I would just need the support of the family of the heart again, because he accepted a woman from another world without support, so he could not gain power. On the contrary, he faced resistance, knowing that he was ruthless and signaled a bride who had no shortcomings. Now he wants to bring Liana back to strengthen their ties, but she is not going to agree to any persuasion. The title of Crown Princess no longer has any meaning for her. Liana told her father to think of younger sisters who could be crown princesses and leave. The father said that one word could not break blood ties, and Liana only laughed. After all, it was he who banished his child with one word. Once he finally got angry and stood up, Liana opened the doors and showed him the way out. He left, of course, but he was unlikely to give up so easily. Liana was worried that next time Crown Prince David might come here, and that would be even worse. Liana couldn't stand by and let someone interfere with her life. If this happens, the only thing she can do is leave here. Liana herself didn't notice how she started to cry. She felt that she was fine, but for some reason the tears continued to flow from her eyes. And for the first time she felt, unfortunately, that she could not turn to a person. But even so, he tried to hug Liana and comfort her. However, later, when she went to bed, she felt ill, and Louis was so worried that he decided to seek help. Cayman ran to her house very quickly and of course woke her up. He asked where the medicine was that could help her. Liana pointed to the bag around the room. He was surprised why she needed such a big suitcase. Liana said that she was going to leave soon. She needed to hurry. Cayman asked why because he thought it was her house. Poston is of course good. The place is warm and cozy. Grandma is also a good person. But Liana has no place to call home. Soon she was able to sleep peacefully because Cayman asked no questions and gave her medicine, and then spent the whole night wiping her forehead. He wondered why Liana had decided to run away so desperately. And of course he understood that it was all because of her fiancé, who had probably understood her values and decided to bring her back. Liana cried even in her sleep, and this made Cayman sad. Liana, who is always bright and smiling, is now so helpless and crying. If it's because of that guy, then Cayman had already made the decision to protect Liana, whoever she was. He even kissed her hands and looked after her until the morning. Morning came as soon as Liana woke up. Louis immediately flew to her because he was worried. In his entire life, he had never seen such a weak owner. Liana thought she had slept for a very long time, but then Cayman came out of the kitchen in an apron and said that she had slept for only a short time. Liana, why is this handsome guy in a frilly apron at her house? But she was grateful that she could see it. Later she learned that it was the sword that called him here when she was feeling bad. Cayman had already prepared breakfast. It was a bit surprising, but it turned out to be very tasty. While eating, he asked Liana where she was going. The girl thought she had let it slip in her sleep, but Cayman said he had found out when he looked at her bag. Liana doesn't want to leave Poston forever, but she needs to go away for a while. And Cayman was so interested in it because he wanted to go with her. Liana was confused. Why was he suddenly saying such things? Cayman reminded that he came here to find less pride in her. But in fact, this is not the main reason. Cayman is worried about Liana. What if she experiences pain alone like yesterday, or cries because of loneliness? She needs someone to wake her up from her nightmares and take care of her, so Cayman wanted to be with her. Liana didn't even know that he thought about her so much, and it was a little touching. But she couldn't accept such help from a friend, so she refused. But Cayman insisted. These were not empty words. If she had not yet decided where to go, he even offered to go to his house. He got down on one knee and decided to propose, only this time he would do it right. Lady Liana, will you be my wife? Liana didn't have time to understand why the fact that she was packing her things to leave Poston resulted in a marriage proposal. Louis told the landlady that the man was honest and had rushed here without hesitation last night to take care of her. But even if his feelings are sincere, it could put him in danger around Liana, because she hasn't told him anything about her identity or situation yet. So it would be right to refuse. When she tried to refuse him, it was very difficult because he was so handsome and she liked him. But he is not only handsome, but also has good manners. Of course, he helps her when she is in trouble and understands her. He is the ideal type of husband she dreamed of. But she must answer him and leave, although it is very unfair. Before she refused, she decided to confess to him that she was one of the 5 daughters of Duke Pond. But Cayman was not at all surprised. He would be surprised only when he heard her story to the end, and he thought that she was packing her things to return to her family. Liana explained that this is not true, and her father came here to take her away, so she tries to avoid him. But for a while, this is the only option. Then she thought that maybe there was no need to go far. After all, as long as her father couldn't find her, everything would be fine. She could create a shelter in Poston, for example, in an ice cave. Instead of leaving, she should find a place to hide. Thanks to Cayman, her thoughts became clear. So she wanted to go out for a while and walk around the area. But when she opened the door, Cayman came very close. He stopped her. She still hadn't responded to his confession. It was very difficult for Liana to think in this situation, because she had a flirting machine in front of her. Cayman was very different now from the first meeting. Liana tried to explain that they needed to find shelter first, but he suggested that she not waste time on that, because he would be there for her, even though her father was a duke. Liana was truly touched. After all, she thought that Cayman, not having such a high status as her father, would not be able to do anything if the duke came here. But even so, Cayman insisted that no matter what happened, he would protect her. So now, he just wanted her to focus and respond to his confession and proposal to date with the premise of marriage. Some time ago, Cayman suddenly contacted his sister and scared her. Now they had to quickly deal with today's work matters. But the sister noticed that now, for some reason, her brother was very quiet and sighing heavily, as if something had happened. The workaholic, obsessed only with work, became so strange after the trip to Poston. The sister decided that she needed to inquire. She was going to listen to him and make him work for his deeds, but she didn't expect the situation to be so serious. Cayman, with such an embarrassed face, announced that he had found a woman he wanted to marry. His sister was shocked. She asked him several times if he was sure he was talking about a real human woman and not a cat. No matter how many young ladies tried to attract his attention, Cayman always showed interest only in cats and had no interest in others. But now, he suddenly started talking about marrying a real woman. Anyway, regarding the Lady of the Pawn Duchy, Sister was already prepared to look for detailed information about the break in her engagement. But it would be good to check two more things. Cayman wanted to erase Duke Pawn's family from this world. But if that was impossible, he wanted to include Poston into the Imperial territory. This was too harsh a statement, and the sister, of course, tried to calm Cayman down. She, of course, understood that everything was fair with this woman, but to remove the Duke and annex the territories was too much, and then she thought about the original reason he went to Poston. The most important thing is the sword of self-esteem. During all this time, the Emperor did not say a word about the sword, but now he calmed his sister down. Now another problem arose. Would this girl agree to the marriage? Few people could agree to marry the Emperor so quickly. Only a very brave lady. And Cayman remembered that Liena did not yet know that he was the Emperor. Now Liena remembered Cayman's confession. That day was like a dream. She clearly remembered his expression at that moment. It was clear that he really liked her, and it wasn't because of Louis. Cayman thought that the reason she was still hesitating to answer was because she couldn't forget her ex-fiancé, so he wanted to wring that guy's neck. Liena couldn't really give an answer because it was all too sudden and she didn't know much about Cayman. Besides, there were problems to solve. But her heart told her that she had feelings too, and she agreed to date him. From now on, Cayman became her boyfriend. He promised that he would protect her. One day had passed since then. Liena was visiting her grandmother, and they were discussing plants, but Liena wasn't listening at all. She was thinking about her own things all the time. Grandma immediately noticed something was wrong, because Liena's eyes usually light up when she talks about her farming. So Grandma started to worry. Only she didn't know that the reason for all this was her grandson. Liena didn't even know where to begin to explain. She said that her father had recently come to her because the prince was looking for her for some unknown reason. But he was probably trying to gain support from the nobles by taking her back. Or he wanted her to take over the princess's affairs. Grandmother couldn't leave everything as it was, and she herself wanted to intervene in it and stop it with her power. How dare this duke come here in secret from her? But Liena didn't want to bother grandmother and asked to just leave it. For a moment, she thought about leaving Poston, and then her grandmother began to dissuade her. Of course, she didn't want to brag, but there was no other place other than Poston that was so welcoming to foreigners, and in any other place the lord of the manor would have taken her sweet potatoes for free. This world is very cruel, and in any other place Liena would have been deceived. Grandma would have continued to dissuade her, but Liena finally shouted out that the guy said it would be better to stay here and not leave. Grandma was shocked that Liena suddenly had a boyfriend, and of course she wondered who it was. Could it be someone she knew? At that moment, Cayman entered the room. He brought desserts and told Grandma that it happened, and now he is Liena's boyfriend. Grandma was in shock for just a few seconds, but she quickly accepted the news, because she had secretly wanted this for a long time. That's why she even suggested starting with the wedding and having the ceremony next week. She also suggested that they have 3 children and not relax at all. Liena reminded that they had only started dating yesterday. Grandma was just too excited. She asked them when they started having feelings for each other, and Cayman suddenly became embarrassed to answer the question. Yesterday he flirted so much with Liena, and today he was embarrassed in front of his grandmother. Liena decided to answer for him. She said that they had simply eaten together many times and had become attached to each other. Grandma looked at the two with affection. She asked, "What is Liena going to do next if her father comes for her?" Liena had already decided that she could hide in the ice cave, but her grandmother couldn't let her live like that. She suggested using the castle. No matter what kind of scoundrel her father was, He simply couldn't enter another nobleman's estate without permission. He might not even think that Liana was hiding here. It was a really good offer, but Liana didn't want to bother her grandmother and refused. However, her grandmother would have been only happy if Liana had stayed here. Now, Liana realized that she was even glad that she was thrown into Poston, because she was able to meet such a good grandmother and her equally good grandson, who remained a close person to her. Grandma can be a good person for Liana because she is a good person too. They quickly decided to give her a room right next to Cayman's. He justified it by saying that if something happened, he had to get to Liana faster than anyone else. It was very embarrassing. Liana went to the butler to find a room. Left alone, the grandmother immediately became very serious and turned to the emperor. She really had no idea what he was thinking. Cayman didn't understand why she had such a reaction. Was it because of Liana's status? But Granny wasn't so old and stupid to be angry about such things. In fact, she was very worried that Liana still didn't understand that Cayman was the emperor. How long is he going to hide his true identity? This isn't just some ordinary title, it's quite serious. What if Liana gets offended when she finds out the truth that was hidden from her? Cayman was now starting to worry about it too. He wasn't trying to hide it. He was just too scared to tell Liana. He was afraid she would choose the farm and leave the emperor. It's unlikely that Liana will give up farming and choose the emperor. Even though she likes him, Liana is happy in Poston. Cayman still has to tell her the truth. Relationships built on illusions, no matter how beautiful they may seem, are just illusions. Grandma said this because she had the same experience when she met her future husband. He told her how much he loved her and wanted to be happy together. But after a while, he took many mistresses, and when his wife expressed dissatisfaction, he said that the emperor would not live only for her, and she should be content with wearing the crown of empress. But still, Grandma truly considers Cayman her dear grandson, and Liana her dear friend. Grandma hopes that they can live happily, without the pain that she herself experienced. The story of grandmother's unhappy marriage is known even in the royal family. She was recognized for her swordsmanship, and perhaps she would have been happier now if she had not come to the empire and become the emperor's wife. Cayman didn't want to let Liana give up her desires for the sake of the throne, because this was not the path to happiness for both of them. By protecting Liana and her farm, this is how Cayman wanted to be happy together. Cayman first said something to his sister as a joke, but the more he thought about it, the clearer it became to him that it was the only and good choice to include Poston into the imperial territories, since it was a city close to the border, and it shouldn't cause any difficulties. Cayman hoped that if he did this, Liana would understand him, even if she knew his true identity. For the first time, Cayman felt the fear that others might not accept him. But as he walked towards his room, he heard Liana's joyful voice, and then all his worries disappeared. Liana was delighted with her new room, which was so spacious and beautiful, and the bed was big and soft. She was constantly racking her brains over what to do, but in the end, everything was resolved very simply. Thanks to Cayman and Granny, she can stay in the safest place. Her boyfriend is so cool, he promised to protect her from the Duke, but it was still a little strange. Why didn't he even blink an eye when he found out that Liana was the Duke's daughter? She wondered more and more. Who is Cayman, and could it be that his status is high? But Liana never saw him while she was in the Pond Duchy. Cayman met her in the room to see if she was happy with the story. She liked everything, so she was very happy, and they decided to walk a little together. Now she felt awkward and nervous for no reason. Probably because she had started to accept him as a boyfriend. It wasn't the first time they had walked alone, but right now, even when they met each other's eyes, Liana blushed and felt awkward. Her heart seemed to stop. Apparently, this is how a date feels. In the past, when Liana met her fiancé, it took no more than 2 minutes. He said that he was always busy and didn't want to just talk to his fiancé because he liked spending time on other girls. Liana felt her heart getting heavier and heavier, but she couldn't contradict the prince, and she had to keep her family calls and behave well in order to become a princess, always smiling brightly, no matter what. To live in love is the greatest happiness, but there was no love between her and David. Cayman asked if he could hold Liana's hand, and there was a sense of sincerity in all his words and actions. Liana felt completely different from how she felt with David. That's how it should be. A kind and warm hand. Liana couldn't hold back her emotions and burst into tears. She thought that she would never be able to love anyone again. But now she realized that she really loves Cayman, just like he loves her. She likes holding hands with him. He has already penetrated deep into her heart. Cayman said that there was a lot that he hadn't had time to tell her, and couldn't tell her about it now. but he didn't want to disappoint her, so he asked her to just wait a little longer. Liana believed in him and didn't feel any danger. Of course, she would wait until he was ready to tell everything. The day went very well, and when evening came, Liana was very tired. But because of the unusual surroundings and such a large room, she doubted that she would be able to sleep. Liana had already forgotten how she always slept in such a room, in the Duke's mansion. But from the very beginning, she had an uneasy feeling, as if she had forgotten something. She forgot about Louis, whom she left at home, and now he himself flew to her, full of rage, because she said that she would return soon, but she herself disappeared all day and, apparently, did not intend to return. He had been following her all day, and it had been very cruel. Liana apologized and explained that they would be staying in the city's castle for a while, but she would tell him the details tomorrow. Still, the fatigue of his memory overcame her, and she fell asleep very quickly. The morning sun shone brighter, illuminating the room, and Liana woke up. Opening her eyes, she saw someone in front of her. There was a beautiful girl lying in front of her, but was that possible? Liana was sure it was a dream and simply rolled over. However, suddenly she heard a voice. This girl made her wake up faster. She was sure that as soon as Liana woke up and saw someone in front of her, she would say hello, but she decided to continue sleeping. And for this, she got minus 20 points. Liana began to understand even more that this was not a dream and that something strange was happening. Who was this girl, and what was she doing in the room right on the bed? They met. The girl's name was Susan, and she was pleased to meet Liana, but this whole situation was very strange and awkward. Moreover, Liana did not understand where Louis had gone again. Usually at such moments he is nearby and is ready to immediately cut off the necks of any suspicious people. Liana thought that perhaps the powers of the owner of this room, but now this room does not belong to her, because her grandmother allocated this place to Liana. Susan knew all this very well. She came to see Liana. What's going on here anyway? As the situation became more and more confusing, Liana left the room because it was awkward, but Susan followed her. Finally, she asked, "Where is Lena going?" She said she just wanted to go for a walk. Susan gave her a plus. These walks are good, and movement is good. Liana still didn't understand what was going on, but it seemed like this girl wasn't a suspicious person, because all the servants greeted her without hesitation. Susan started asking if Liana liked Poston, and when she got a positive answer, she started lying down and saying that everything was much better in the Empire. Liana didn't understand why the conversation turned to the Empire, and then Susan asked what she thought of the Emperor. Liana was increasingly unable to understand the meaning of these questions. Perhaps rumors of the harvest had reached the Empire, and Liana could expand her business. In that case, it would even be good. Liana continued walking and suddenly came across raspberry bushes that were already ripe. Liana suggested this girl to try. Susan was a little surprised. How could you not wash the berries? The air here is clean, so you don't have to wash them. The raspberries didn't even taste sour. Liana said that you can make something out of them, and then the raspberries will be sour. Susan asked who would make the jam anyway. Liana, of course, said that she made it herself, especially in this village. Susan had the same reaction as Cayman had earlier. They both couldn't wrap their heads around the idea of cooking something themselves. Liana just laughed and asked the girl to help pick raspberries to make refreshing raspberry iced tea because it was very hot today. Meanwhile, Cayman was training on the court, and Louis was secretly watching him. He heard that Cayman was the grandson of a stupid former emperor, but this guy seemed okay. Louis felt a great strength, especially those confident eyes. Cayman reminded Louis very much of his first master. They really are very similar to me. He was the strongest, and he needed the strongest sword like Louis. Only then it didn't have its own name, it was just called the Sword of Self-Love. The guy confidently claimed that it was to defeat the dragon, and so the sword was enchanted and accepted him as its first master. This young man later became a great hero and emperor of a huge empire. The first emperor of the Martial Empire, Louis Martial, was really cool, but as its status grew, the sword became more and more of a showpiece. Countless emperors treated it like a ceremonial ball. Despite this, Louis endured, feeling the presence of its first owner among all the emperors that followed. But this patience ended with the previous emperor, who was a worthless fool and did not even know of Louis's existence. The empress left the empire after the divorce, and Louis left quietly without being seen by anyone. But who would have thought that he would meet this descendant again in distant Poston? If Louis had known that they were using that guy's name, then he would have shown unnecessary pride when he should have simply asked for a name to be invented while the first emperor was still alive. Cayman had noticed the sword's presence a long time ago, and he said that if Louis wanted to say something, he should say it and not peek. Louis got embarrassed and said that he was just checking if he was doing it right, and that it was just awful. Cayman didn't hear what the sword was saying and thought that it wanted to talk about Liena. Cayman said that he was serious about her, and of course he had a month of pride for her initially. But now it's different, and he began to respect Louis's will to serve Liena. Louis lingered as long as he could. Why was this guy so cute? And then Cayman thought maybe it was because Louis wanted to be waved around. Louis denied it too much, but when Cayman took the sword in his hands, Louis felt joy and thought that he could let Cayman use it at least once. Louis called it a test. Is this guy suitable as a partner for the owner? Cayman moved very quickly and easily. Louis was almost fascinated. Why was this guy so brilliant? Louis was actually pleased, but he had conflicting feelings, and then he felt the master next to him. Louis immediately flew to his mistress and began to cry, calling himself a bad sword. It all happened so unexpectedly that the raspberries she had been so diligently picking simply crumbled. More precisely, it would have fallen apart if Susan had not been nearby, who has a very fast reaction, and she managed to catch all the raspberries. Cayman was surprised to see his sister here. He asked why she was here. This is the second Princess Susan Marshall. She is Cayman's younger sister, and Liena only found out about it now. Susan could have simply said that she came to see who would become her daughter-in-law, but instead she burst into the sleeping man's room and then chased him everywhere. Then they went together to the kitchen to make tea. Susan even helped him, but she also watched closely how the Sword of Pride did not even leave Liena. Sometime later, they made several servings of raspberry iced tea. Liena immediately blushed when she saw Cayman, or rather, her boyfriend, who had just finished training and looked like he was trying to seduce her with his wet appearance. Liena was embarrassed, especially because his sister was there. Liena quietly told Cayman to go dry his hair so he wouldn't catch a cold. He was just in a hurry because he didn't want to keep her waiting. Susan was surprised that the two were already communicating informally, and then Grandma arrived. They all sit at the table together to drink this cooling drink, and were surprised that Susan even helped. Susan watched everything carefully and noticed that the atmosphere between her brother and grandmother was different from usual. Even if Cayman and this girl were dating, he was still the emperor. But why was he using such a friendly tone? Susan suddenly realized that maybe this girl didn't yet know who Cayman really was. Judging by the reactions of her brother and grandmother, Susan knew it was true even without the answers. As soon as she began to scold them, intending to immediately reveal everything as it was, Cayman managed to stop her and even change the subject of the conversation. They ended up having a real fight because they didn't agree on anything, and they went into another room to talk. Liena didn't even know that Cayman had a younger sister, and Grandma said that in fact he even had two younger twin sisters. Cayman hadn't returned home for a long time, so one of them decided to come and visit him. Liena realized that Cayman was trying to hide the existence of his sister-in-law. This means that Liena is already starting to feel like a daughter-in-law. A few days ago, in the Imperial Palace, the sisters were discussing the fact that their brother had not returned for too long. Susan was very unhappy about this because she wanted to go on vacation to the south of the country, but she could not leave the capital. And then Reese said that her brother had a fiancé in Poston. Susan was astonished, as a man who only loved cats suddenly wanted to marry a real woman. And what about the Sword of Pride he was riding for? The first sister, Reese, actually felt sorry for Cayman because it seemed like unrequited love. He wouldn't be able to take the bride with him. And Susan decided that she had to personally bring her brother and the bride candidate here. Reese said that she shouldn't do that and ruin someone else's love, but Susan just quit her job because she felt it was unfair that her brother could rest and she couldn't, and so she ran away without even listening to her sister. Now Susan was trying to figure out why her brother hadn't told his girlfriend that he was the emperor, because some kind of pride followed this woman like a servant. How could it be left as it was? Reese already told that the emperor was going to marry this woman, but then how could she hide her identity? Is it really to get the sword of self-love? Cayman might have done so, but now he believes that he is an enemy without love. This is not something he can do. At first, he thought that revealing his identity would put him at a disadvantage, and Liena could use blackmail. But the more they talked and spent time together, the better they got along, and the more Cayman realized that he needed to keep things secret. And now he understood why Louis chose Liena as his mistress. Cayman had already decided that he wanted to protect Liena and Louis' desire to follow her. In the end, it was the fear of not being met with hatred from this woman that prevented him from telling the truth. The Sword of Pride symbolizes the Emperor's legitimacy, and Cayman clearly understands its importance, but Susan does not understand why her brother acts the way he does. Why does he act as if he became friends with Louis? Now, the sisters' words don't matter anymore. After all, the Emperor will be able to wield the sword together through marriage, so that part is already decided. The sister asked when the Emperor was going to return to the Empire. Even if the grandmother didn't live on the train, it was still a different country. And then she learned the shocking news. The Emperor was thinking about including Poston into the Empire so as not to return to the capital, but to do business right here, as he does now. Susan didn't know anything about it because all the countries told. But it would be easy to include this place in the Empire, and with the communication tunnel and teleportation zone, remote work would be a definite possibility. Anyway, the brother said that Susan would realize what a nice place it was after she spent some time here. However, his identity had to be kept secret until everything was ready. Susan was very angry. She came all this way to hear this? Her brother was a real fool, and it was all because of this woman. This year, Liena is destined to raise children, but she doesn't understand why she continues to surround herself with such strange people. Susan continued to pursue her, crying. And Louis cried too, calling himself a bad sword. Liena asked, "Did they have a fight with Cayman?" But Susan didn't want to talk. Liena was just walking around the area. She rarely went near the glass greenhouse, but this time she came to have a look at the place. Apparently, it is not looked after at all. It is very dirty. Liena once suggested having a picnic, but Grandma would look at her angrily. Apparently, there were bad memories associated with this place. Liena decided to clean up here and asked to turn into scissors. Susan didn't understand why Liena was doing this old-fashioned gardening. But even after she said so, Liena continued anyway. Susan wasn't in the mood anyway, and Liena was still doing this for her brother. Susan couldn't understand how a person could exist who didn't know that she would become empress. Susan said again that a mistress should not do such things, and that Liena had better stop. Liena didn't understand why Susan was acting like this, and instead of this useless request, she advised her to go and make peace with her brother. It is natural for a person to work in order to live well-fed. And even if a person is an owner, then on the contrary, he must show initiative. If the owner is resting, the workers will not work properly. To make others work, the owner must try even harder. Susan remembered that her brother had always been a workaholic. He even put off meals to work. He probably worked hard for the people. Susan finally understood why they fell in love with each other. And then she started telling about how her older brother had suffered a lot since childhood, and how her grandfather was very strict and scary. Grandpa especially didn't like Reese and Susan, so he scolded them even for the most insignificant things, and Cayman was always scolded because he defended himself. Cayman may grumble sometimes and be stubborn a lot, when Susan asked to learn horse riding or when she insisted on getting wooden swords, but the brothers never stopped. He always supported her undertakings, which had no results. Because of such an older brother, Susan seems to have become sensitive, even without realizing it. It was very much like Cayman. He never asked Liena why she was doing farming. He just supports all the successes, and he must be happy to have such a good sister. When Liena was kicked out of her home, no one helped her, not even her sisters. Now she realizes that she was a truly pathetic person. She thought that this world was a place where one had to move around alone. But when Cayman said that he would protect her, she was very surprised. Meeting him was a stroke of luck, so Liena wants to be that kind of person for Cayman too. Susan began to understand this girl better and even asked her to take care of her older brother. And if hard times come, she cannot be shy to ask for help, and now they are a family. Liena and Susan felt a great rapprochement and shook hands. But suddenly they heard some screams. Someone was trying to break into the territory with a weapon. The servants immediately asked the lady to stay in the greenhouse for a while, because uninvited guests are trying to invade this castle, and with weapons too. Grandmother didn't expect that he would dare to do this and try to take Liena away by force. It was very impudent. The invasion of the kingdom's soldiers is tantamount to a declaration of war, and it is indeed very dangerous. Cayman was going to deal with it himself, but Granny said that it was Poston, and the emperor of another country cannot interfere. Moreover, he is now Liena's lover and can act on emotions which can cause an accident, so Grandma couldn't allow it. She can still protect these people, so she gets out of everything herself. Cayman looked with disgust at the man who abandoned his daughter, considering her useless, and now returned to forcefully take her away and use her. Even if Liena forgives her father, Cayman definitely won't be able to. Milady Aurelian made the Duke into her house and even talked to him respectfully because he was still a Duke, and she was just a lord from some village, despite the fact that she had previously been an empress. Before starting a serious conversation, the Duke made several sarcastic jokes and then said that he had come to express his gratitude for the fact that she had taken care of his daughter for several years. Aurelian said that Liena was a very smart and diligent child. The whole poet loved her, and she did not ask anyone for help. But the most important thing is that Liena renounced the pawn name, so the Duke no longer had to worry. The Duke exploded that this woman dared to contradict him, but still he came to take his daughter and had to find out where she was now. Aurelian said that the Duke was a little late, and Lena had recently said that she wanted to go on a trip, so she had been given a pass. But the Duke had checked the information beforehand, and there was no person who came from Poston. He was sure that she would not have gone to distant lands, because she would not have had the determination to go further than the place where she was born. The Duke said bluntly that the prince had been missing Liena for a long time. And finally, the woman who pretended to be a saint revealed her true nature. The Duke believed that even if Liena did not want to be the crown princess, he, as parents, was obliged to guide the child on a happy path. Aurelian also followed her heart and became a modest country lord. But although she got the divorce she wanted, not everything was well. She could no longer live with her children and grandchildren, and she had to endure the humiliating looks of those who learned of her situation. But at least to say, "I persuade children for their happiness," is a good feeling. But did Lena look unhappy when the Duke visited her recently? Lena looks very happy and content with her current life. If a person lives the way he wants, it does not mean that all outcomes will be happy. At least there would be no regrets, and real parents teach their children to live like that, so she advised the Duke to just leave Liena alone. So that's what a parent's role is, the child's participation. But the Duke was sure that all this was nonsense, and that it was impossible to live happily in such conditions, especially for the Duke's daughter, who had lived in luxury since childhood. And anyway, even if the child is unhappy, it doesn't matter at all, considering that she became the daughter of a Duke. She should listen to her parents' words whether she wants to or not. But devoting herself to the family is the child's duty. Liena was in this greenhouse for the first time and wanted to examine everything here, but her thoughts were occupied with something else. Her father came here with a weapon. This is a real declaration of war. Knowing his character, it is unlikely that he will obediently leave. Liena was afraid that if she didn't intervene, her father would attack Poston, and then everything would be over. Life, the village, her grandmother, the lord, and including Cayman. Louis had been crying up until this point, but now he proudly declared that he would protect his master. Liena felt a little better thanks to his words, so she decided to go and talk to her grandmother. But it turns out that the soldiers brought by the Duke had already made their way into the greenhouse, and one of them grabbed Liena by the hand. The soldier said that the Duke knew that she would hide here, and no one believed that a young lady who never left home would go on long journeys. Susan immediately rushed to help. She said to the soldier, "Take your hands off because I will consider his actions disobedience to Lord Poston." But the soldier was too confident and said that Lord Poston would not be able to do anything to him. Susan was getting stronger and stronger, and Liena understood that she had to stop this soldier so that nothing bad would happen to them. She said that by invading someone else's territory, they were declaring war. Only the soldier was very pleased with this invasion, and he believed that Poston, who had hidden the young lady, was the real culprit. The soldier said that he was doing all this for Lady Liena because she had the opportunity to become the highest-ranking woman in the country, and she couldn't refuse that. She was born into wealth, grew up enjoying its fruits, so she must repay the favor. And in general, she harmed the family by taking responsibility for the broken engagement and being cast out from the family. According to her father, it was her own fault that she was expelled from the family. Her father and brothers did nothing but watch her misfortune. It cannot be that a simple soldier came up with such words alone. This means that the whole story is spread. The soldier completely forgot about statuses and said that Liena couldn't seduce even one man. She's a talentless person. Louis did not like it very much to kill him. The master is very talented among the decades and even centuries that he lived. She is the most wonderful master who recognized the value of the sword of self-love. Louis didn't want the master to continue listening to this slander, and he needed to act somehow. He just needed to take the sword in his hands and fight together. Liena felt a surge of self-confidence. Why should she retreat if she had done nothing wrong? Hearing such words and not doing anything was not in her character, so she took her sword and attacked the soldier. This was her first time using a sword, but for some reason she did it so well as if she was very talented at it. Even the soldier was surprised to think that this lady had studied fencing because he had difficulty parrying her blows. Louis said it was because when he was around, anyone could become the best swordsman in the world. That was Louis' power. He would not leave those who tormented his master alone. Liana moved very professionally, swinging her sword without using any unnecessary effort. She even managed to cut the soldier's sword in half, and he didn't know what to do anymore. In the end, he got scared and just ran away. Liana was grateful, and he is so amazing. All this time she hid her amazing abilities. Liana was very pleased that Louis stood up for her, and although she was his mistress, she did nothing for him, but only scolded him. Louis loved Liana very much, and she never scolded him. Even now, she only praises him, and all his other previous users thought that they were strong because of their own strength. Louis prefers a master who recognizes his strength. Still, he wouldn't want to be used as a pair of cucumber-tip scissors. But there are no scissors as sharp as Louis's anywhere. Susan stood aside during this time, and she was really surprised. Her daughter-in-law was so cool and was able to break the sword in half. Susan was delighted and would like to see this flawless skill at least one more time. This behavior was very unexpected, and Liana was suddenly promoted to the status of daughter-in-law. Liana, of course, said that it was not her skills but Louis's strength, but Susan still liked it very much, because her daughter-in-law is the owner of the ball to Luba herself. Finally, Cayman came to the greenhouse, and the grandmother told them a few more words about how soldiers had entered the castle earlier. But fortunately, everything was safe here. Susan proudly told how her daughter-in-law defeated the soldiers who came here. Liana was proud too, because she just held Louis and he did it all himself. It's a very smart sword. Cayman was shocked. He didn't know that the sword of self-love could fight on its own, and that it was a matter of master to control it with a kiss. But Louis had long boasted that all the great feats of previous masters were his merit. Apparently, he wasn't lying after all. Cayman about this. It means that all the rivers of the previous emperors were not their merit, but all thanks to the sword. Grandma stood somewhere to the side. She looked at the agave leaf that was cut, and all because of the soldier who ruined everything. Liana first saw agave in this greenhouse, but they say that the syrup from it is sweet and tasty, and can be used to make fiber, syrup, and even alcohol. But Grandma looked dejected because this agave plant was the only thing she took with her after the divorce. When the Duke left, he said that next time it would end with more than just words. He shouldn't have thrown words around. If he wants war, the Lord will give him war. He is to blame with me that his soldiers entered the estate. Grandmother also ordered the butler to bring her armor and sword. She was going to prepare for war right now. When Aurelian was young, the prince showed her this agave plant for the country. This plant is necessary, but because of the civil war of the ancestors, everything was burned, and the agave was on the verge of extinction. Then Aurelian, and in principle the decision to believe in this birth and to raise it together. He will be the fourth prince with a son far from the throne, but due to Aurelian's significant contribution in the Battle of the Heirs, I was unable to rise to the position of emperor. She knew that he lacked a lot, but deep down she loved him and wanted to be with him. She had come all the way to this distant foreign land, believing in the vow to be happy together, but the love he spoke of was in vain. He cheated on her, but at the same time he believed that it was her fault, because she had no charm from the very beginning, and no one would like such a cruel woman. He betrayed her trust and then blamed her. Aurelian gave up on such a worthless man without hesitation and decided to return home. Then the emperor thought that she had gone mad, because she was an empress, and how could she refuse such a position? But Aurelian had made her decision and was not going to change it when the emperor realized this. He tried to apologize and keep her by his side, saying that it was his own fault and that he couldn't live without her. But his wife never returned to him. He is too bold. She was once proud of him. As a sign of this pride, she took with her one pot of agave. Grandma said that Liana had to go, but she didn't want to go, because it was her problem too. However, when the soldiers broke the agave, it became a problem for Aurelian too. But Grandma told her grandchildren not to interfere with it and to go. Liana will do something later, but Cayman suggested just leaving until Grandma calms him down. Moreover, although it is hard to believe, Grandma is incredibly strong, and now it is difficult to say who is really in danger here. Susan also started talking about how hard her grandmother once broke a sword with her bare hands. Even Louis knew how strong she was. Aurelian was a walking disaster, although her body didn't show it. When Susan learned the whole story of why the Duke came here, she just wanted to take the sword and send the Duke to hell. She wanted to hit right now even the crown prince who abandoned Liana, and that thief nanny who went unpunished. Although the Duke's soldier damaged the agave, it was all the result of Liena's actions, so she wanted to solve the problem. Now the situation is on the brink of war, but for some reason the brother and sister talk about love. Why are they so calm? Liena thought that the only way out was to pacify her father herself with Louis. Liena wanted to get rid of the Duke, but not to harm Poston. She does not want to go back at all and is worried because she wants to be with Cayman. These words calmed his soul, and he told Liena to just relax and trust him. And if she waited a little, everything would be decided, because Cayman already had something on his mind. Then they decided to take a walk together, and Liena asked the guy, "He's not thinking about fighting personally, is he? If it comes to the point where the crown prince stands up for the Duke, then it will be very difficult. Cayman wants to marry Liena, so he should be able to easily deal with her problems, and he is very happy that she supports him and does not want to return to the kingdom. But even if she said she would come back, she would still be next to him." Cayman suggested that they go to their rooms and went forward first. Liena felt that the atmosphere in the air was eerie. Maybe it was just her imagination, but Louis had gotten used to it. He couldn't let his guard down when someone from the Marshall family was around. There was definitely madness in his blood. In the Crown Prince's palace, Kang Sina came to him again and saw a familiar situation. The prince drank again and fell asleep. Although she told him that it was harmful to the body, he was angry with her all the time and they quarreled. It would be nice if he was always calm, but the way he was before, pure and innocent, is a real lie. He just fooled Sina. Suddenly, I noticed a photograph between some documents. She decided to take a look, and at first the portrait seemed familiar to her, and after a while she remembered that this was the daughter of the Duke of Pond. She is the villain from the novel. Thanks to her knowledge of the original story, Kang Sina was able to quickly break off the engagement so that the villainess didn't have time to do anything, and managed to defeat her in advance without any consequences. But now she didn't understand why he was so disposed. There was this portrait. Did he really miss this woman? Liena hadn't even appeared again, so why? And then the girl thought, what if this was not written in the original, but David continued to miss Liena? At first she tensed up, but then she decided that it didn't make sense and that it couldn't be. David began to move a little in his sleep, causing a few more papers to fall off the table. Sina accidentally noticed what was written there and learned that the prince wanted to announce that the prophecy had been misinterpreted. The virgin who descended from heaven will bring prosperity and abundance to this country. In the original work, the principal and the Holy Virgin appear in each other and naturally come to a happy ending. But the most decisive reasons for their within became the prophecies. But now they have decided to declare that the prophecy is wrong. This means that they must part. Next came a letter from Duke Pond, saying that Liena was currently living in a small area called Poston, but that he would soon bring her here. Sina realized that all this is very different from the original, and even if she knows the original prevented the evil deed in advance, the villain is still a villain. She is so evil that she was able to change the original, and, apparently, she will soon return and start flirting with the prince, although he already has a wife. Sina has decided to meet this fox before David does, so she will soon go to Poston. Evening has come. Liena has calmed down, but she needs to hurry to stop her grandmother. If a territorial war starts, the plans will go awry in many ways. Of course, and even if the grandmother does nothing, it will be impossible to lose to the Duke. Cayman's grandfather constantly told him that no matter how hard he tried, he would not be able to become an emperor recognized by everyone, and he was just wasting his time. But unlike him, Cayman was the acknowledged heir to the throne, so Grandpa was especially harsh. He often bragged to him, but now it turns out that Grandpa's ball art was thanks to the Sword of Pride. Cayman made various efforts to gain his recognition, but his grandfather was a cowardly and ugly man until the very end. However, Cayman is grateful to him for one thing. Thanks to him, the Sword of Self-Love chose Liena, and Cayman himself was able to meet her in Poston. Cayman came to his grandmother. She was already there with her armor and sword, serious. He asked if his grandmother was okay, worried that she couldn't get up because of the sounds. She would fall. Obviously, in this way, he was trying to somehow stop her. Cayman said that the Duke was Liena's father, and even if they were torn apart, he was still family, and she wouldn't want to harm him. But Grandma was serious because her feelings were hurt by the money too. The Duke had hurt her head, which meant a lot. Grandma thought her heart was growing. Maybe it was stupid for Grandma to hold on to the past, but Cayman understood her, and perhaps he had inherited Grandma's inability to let go of what was in her heart. In that way, they were alike. He finally told her that he was currently studying how to incorporate Poston into the empire, so he asked his grandmother to stop the territorial war at least for his sake. She was shocked. If the emperor took the kingdom's lands, it was obvious that relations with the kingdom would deteriorate, and Poston was not even in a geographically important place. But Poston belongs to his grandmother, so Cayman decided to get only her permission. Recognizing the autonomy of a lord is an unspoken rule of world politics, regardless of the country. The grandmother thought it was very strong, but the grandson explained that this was not a simple matter, and there was a reason for all this. Baron and Reese believed that it would be best to take the form of a gift, but gifting the land to a grandson who has no connection to the land will cause resentment. Therefore, if the grandmother agrees, she can give this land to the child of Cayman and Liena because she is a citizen of the same country. Grandma didn't object, but how could she do this if they weren't even married yet? The emphasis will take longer because they are not married yet. So until then, Cayman suggested that Grandma just live quietly as Lord of Postana, which will become an imperial territory. Reese will send a marriage proposal to the royal palace right now. If the Lord demanded incorporation for such reasons, the kingdom would not be able to contest it. The grandmother was surprised that her grandson had thought it through so well, and perhaps he had inherited this desire from her after all. But first, Liena had to be convinced to go to the empire to marry, and Cayman decided to leave this choice entirely to her, acting as she wished. It would be strange if the empress of the nation were to be in such a remote place, and not in the capital. Cayman came to this conclusion after thinking about his last conversation with his grandmother. How can everyone be happy without someone's sacrifice? Grandmother realized that she couldn't impose the old rules and expect Liena to become an empress and live by the standards of the past. Even if her love was great, such an approach would not bring any benefit. Grandmother realized that it was not worth starting a war, especially if Liena took up farming. In addition, if Liena became empress, she would definitely be able to spread agave cultivation throughout the empire. Grandma realized that clinging to the past was not stupid, but she already had children in her life and now grandchildren. The old era was gone, and her children were continuing the path, even if it did not correspond to tradition. Grandmother was proud that her family continued to rule the country, but if the Duke started causing trouble again, she would not sit idly by. The Duke came to see Liena's achievements, her vast fields and garden. The Duke was not pleased that Liena had achieved such success. He believed that she should have been taught something important to maintain a good position in society rather than farming. Even the nanny didn't believe that Liena could survive alone, but when she tried to talk to her, Liena got angry and drove her away. Everyone started saying that Liena had some kind of special influence, and this couldn't help but attract attention. The Duke was thinking about how he could quickly change his daughter's mind, since there was very little time left for this. He decided that if Liena went to the palace, he would help her get rid of her regrets and support her along the way. At night, Liena woke up from a loud scream and heard that a fire had started on her farm. Cayman immediately burst into her room to wake her up and warn her about the fire. Liena immediately got ready and ran to her field, even from afar seeing how huge the fire was. She did not understand how it could have started and what was saved. Liena was ready to walk straight into the fire to find out what happened. The servants tried to stop her, but she pushed them away. This farm was her life, her work. She built it from scratch. Cayman tried to calm her down, saying that it was too dangerous and that she needed to think about people, not just the floor. Liena realized that there was nothing she could do to help the field, but people could get hurt. The fire had to be put out before it engulfed the village. All the residents began to carry water from the well, and soon they were able to put out the fire. Everyone was exhausted, but the field was saved. The watermelon field was lost, but the vineyard remained safe. Liena stood there with empty eyes, watching the destruction. Cayman noticed her state and came over, saying that it was normal to cry at times like these. He said it was okay, but Liena couldn't even shed a tear. Suddenly, someone reported seeing a man in strange clothes pouring oil on the field and setting it on fire. It is now clear that the fire was arson and not a natural disaster. Liena realized that it was her father who had set her field on fire. She could not cry because in her soul there was only a feeling of anger. Liena decided that she would not tolerate this any longer. She wanted an apology from her father, despite everyone trying to stop her. Cayman promised to catch the criminal and make him kneel before Liena to apologize. After that, he had an important conversation with her. The next morning, Cayman contacted his sister and announced the engagement, as well as Poston's integration into the empire. The emperor decided to appoint Count Russell to lead a detachment on this mission to boost morale and advance the border. Perhaps it would be necessary to take control of the surrounding territories, but for that, there would need to be a justification. Reese waited for her brother to voice his intentions, but for some reason he remained silent. Cayman saw something too ugly, so he had to act fast. Reese never found out why, but she immediately decided to take care of it right now, even sacrificing her sleep before sparks flew. Her brother could be scary sometimes. Duke Pond crossed the line today. Not only did he invade the train, but he also thoughtlessly burned Lena's work. Cayman never wants to see that sad expression again. Even as an emperor, he dare not take her efforts lightly, and he decided to lead his troops here, even though it would cause him trouble due to it being an infiltration of the kingdom without permission. Suddenly, Lewis appeared behind him. He wanted to help him get revenge and lend his power. Of course, he tried to get his point across, but no one heard what he was saying. Lewis just moved in such a way that it seemed like Cayman was about to take him in his arms. And as soon as Cayman touched the sword's hilt, the sword of self-love adjusted to the size of his palm. It could be said that it recognized him, but it is obvious that he borrowed his strength for the sake of his mistress. A long time ago, they heard a man's voice right from the window, and he was calling Lena. Cayman was glad to hear this because now he would not have to waste time looking for the Duke. He stood in the street with his guards and shouted that the longer Lena hid, the worse it would be for her. Cayman came out with his soldiers. He said that Lena had sent to protect her land after the Duke's action, and she would definitely not be here. The Duke was afraid. Why are there so many soldiers in this village? And Cayman laughed with the whole army of the Duke. He said that if he was going to give away a territorial war, then the empire would not stand aside. If something happens to the former empress, then the current emperor will react extremely sharply. More precisely, he has already reacted like that, and he does not intend to let the violators in peace go. Cayman ordered his soldiers to kill anyone who would resist, to punish the evildoers. The Duke really didn't know what to do. He realized that these people were from the empire, which meant the situation was very bad. At first, he decided to get out of here, but he ended up right under the feet of a beautiful woman. Susan couldn't let her brother have fun alone, although he managed without her. The Duke didn't know who it was, so he started threatening with his status. Susan laughed that he didn't even know the face of the princess of the empire. Then it became clear to him that the man whom the princess called her brother was the emperor. Cayman said sarcastically that it was a great honor for him to meet his father-in-law. Lena roughly assessed the damage done to the field and decided to take a break and rest at home. But suddenly, she noticed the oil and realized that her father was even planning to burn her house down. If the fire started while she was sleeping at home, she could die. Even if the Duke considered his child a tool, how could he go so far? And suddenly she heard her father's voice outside. She decided to go out and check. Had he brought soldiers again? However, she saw something unexpected. Her father was standing right on his knees and shaking with fear, and behind him stood Cayman. He caught the criminal, as he promised. The Duke began to beg for forgiveness and even bowed to the ground. He said that he was doing all this only for Lena, and the crown prince was waiting for her in the castle. She would be happy if she became the crown princess. How dare he say that when he destroyed everything that was dear to her? Now he makes up an excuse, easily apologizes, and just as easily set this fire. Even if Lena hits him with her anger, his field will never return. Lena thought that if her father asked for forgiveness, her heart might soften. But now she realized that this was not what she wanted. Cayman offered to make this apology more sincere if it would make her feel better. Cook anything. Now he left it up to Lena to figure out what she wanted. The Duke thought that this would definitely be his end if Lena really had such a relationship with the Emperor. Lena hated the Duke, but he was still her father. She couldn't forgive him just because of the family ties. The only thing she wanted was to never see this man again and for him to have nothing to do with her life. Cayman said that the Duke would never appear near Lena again, otherwise not only he but also his precious mouth would not be safe. And now he will never appear before her again. Now it is all really over. Receiving an apology that didn't sound sincere left Lena feeling empty. Still, she was glad that Cayman stood up for her in front of her father. If she had been alone, she definitely wouldn't have received even such an empty apology, and everything would have been much more difficult. And of course, she was very grateful to Louis, because he also helped a lot in this matter. He lent the Emperor his strength for the sake of his mistress, but he felt like trash. He wanted to be scolded for cheating on her and letting someone else use him. The damage was not small, but not that big. Only the watermelon field suffered and everything else was saved. But still, Even with the watermelon, it was very disappointing. After all, they were so delicious. Liana let go of this situation. There are always years of bad and good harvests. In such times, you don't need to give up. You can just start all over again. Her face was tanned by the scorching sun. Her hair was tied high and her fingers were rough. Liana didn't look like what her father would call an elegant young lady. But if it was different, it didn't mean it was bad. The current Liana is much better than the one who was a noble lady, and Cayman respects her for living honestly despite the difficulties. He wanted to tell her something as soon as they were done with the Duke. And now he was about to say that she really was the Emperor. But suddenly, this important moment was interrupted by Susan, who had been worried about Liana all this time. Coming closer, Susan quickly wiped Liana's face first, and the handkerchief turned black. Liana felt ashamed that she had still been talking to Cayman like that, so she said that she couldn't talk to him now, and that she would listen to what he had to say a little later. She ran away and he couldn't stop her. But it was all because of Susan who interrupted such a moment, the best time for a conversation. During this day, Liana made tea from jackum beans. This is a very unusual ingredient. It is useful for the respiratory system. All this is for the inhabitants of the empire who helped put out the fire and inhaled smoke. Today was a difficult day. When sending the notice of registration and marriage proposal to the royal palace, the emperor announced that the duke would be traveling to the empire to attend his daughter's wedding. Well, then the emperor is going to leave the duke in the custody of his grandmother so that she can do with him as she sees fit. He has damaged her precious things. It's funny, the emperor told the kingdom that the duke would be in the empire, but he locked him in Poston. Grandmother thought Cayman would forgive the duke for Liana's sake, but she didn't expect him to solve the problem so skillfully. And you can also use the duke's soldiers to build Poston's border walls, and even if the kingdom finds out about it, it won't do anything. Grandmother learned that the Sword of Pride recognized the emperor, and everyone was delighted. She was proud too. Cayman said that he only helped to protect the owner, but even when the previous emperor was the owner of this sword, he did not allow Liana to even touch it. Perhaps he recognized Cayman as the owner, but did not say so. The main thing is that everything went well. But Cayman hasn't revealed his true identity yet. He's too timid in this matter. It seemed that there weren't many difficulties left ahead. But now a new problem appeared on the horizon. Cansina arrived in Poston. Liana looked at the agave and said that everything was fine with it. The plant is already preparing to bloom. Its leaves are bright. They receive moisture and sun, so they look good. It's just a pity that after the fire, the agave started to ooze juice, and a strange stem appeared on it. The radio of a worried grandmother. The girl studied this issue for several days. Now she is a real expert on this plant. She learned that agave flowers are very rare. That's why they are called century plants. They say that after a few decades, they produce a flower and die. Liana said that this little boy is trying to show his grandmother his flower for the last time, but asked her not to be upset. She doesn't know the exact date, but she thinks the plant will bloom in 3 days and then she can make a wish. Everyone does that. Grandma doesn't look upset, but inside she's probably feeling very sad. The girl didn't think that a flower that couldn't speak would give them such an unexpected gift. Just a few days ago, it seemed like the world was about to collapse. But today, such a joyful event happened. They are all happy to see their grandmother smile because they know how important it is to her. The woman asked Liana to check the flower every day. The girl promised that she would check the farm in the morning and go to the greenhouse in the evening. She is already waiting for the flower to bloom to make a wish to be happy with the stone. The girl turned to him and he looked into her eyes and was a little embarrassed. She asked why he was looking at her like that, not understanding what he saw on her face. And he said that she was just focused and very sweet. Liana imagined how she looked from the outside. Her hair tied in pigtails, a straw hat on her head, and gardening gloves, then laughed and asked not to embarrass her. The guy also said that he really likes her like this. She asked him to stop because she was going to burst from embarrassment. The grandmother said with displeasure that they should at least restrain themselves a little in front of her, and hinted that it was very indecent. She joked that if they were no longer hiding that they were in a relationship, then it was time to get married and have a child, and not just hug. The guy was confused when he heard about the child, but Liana thought it was very cute. Time passed. An assistant came to the woman and said that a guest had arrived at the castle, but she was not expecting anyone. Liana looks out the window at this man and thinks that so many years have passed, but nothing has changed. It is clear that the girl has not yet adapted and feels like a stranger in this world. Her naive face remains the same. She has not improved at all, even after becoming the crown princess. The assistant took her to the living room and asked the lady if she really shouldn't let anyone in. The girl replied that she had come to meet her and there was no need to invite anyone. If the rumors that David was trying to make Liana crown princess again were true, then she definitely came to ask her to turn down his offer. Cayman walked the girl into the room, wanted to go with her, but she asked to leave her alone. He warns that her mood may get worse, to which she says that everything will be fine. She thinks it's better to meet and discuss everything face to face than to put it off until later and make it worse. Liana remembered that she was in terrible shape and immediately decided to change her clothes. She had recently been digging around in the plants in the greenhouse. After that, she urgently needed to tidy herself up. She promised to sort everything out and come back. He wished her well and waved his hand. The guy knows a lot about Kang Xiang. The kingdom's diplomatic envoy has arrived to announce the marriage of the prince and the saint. The kingdom is facing a rise ahead, but the empire, having lost the sword of pride, is facing only decline. When the guy remembers how arrogant they were when they realized the other side had lost the sword of pride, he is filled with anger. Marrying a saint could give authority to the temple, and this would greatly help in governing the people. As long as the saint remains, only good things will happen in this country. Such superstitious propaganda works very well. Well, who knew that because of the holy marriage with Liana was dissolved? His heart aches, remembering Liana, who had to suffer in front of hundreds of glances. Cayman doesn't yet know what this woman's goal is, but if it's not enough for her that she took Liana's place and came to torment her again, then he can't just stand and watch this. He found the servants' clothes, put them on himself to eavesdrop on their conversation. The servants pretended not to notice anything unusual and thought it was none of their business anyway. The guest is walking down the corridor. She doesn't like that it's so long. Her legs hurt and she said it as if it was someone's fault. The girl passes by the stone. He thinks that she does not know his face and that such a disguise is enough. At that moment, she turns around, looked straight at him and came up to him so quickly that he didn't even notice. She grabbed his hand, screamed, and asked what he was doing here and what this whole circus was about. The guy took his hand back, apologized and said that he thought she had confused him with someone else. Even suggested asking his other colleagues. Supposedly, they could confirm that he had been working there for many years. The girl looked at him closely, then laughed and asked him not to pretend because even a child would recognize the Emperor Cayman Marshal, no matter how he hid. He didn't expect this. He thought that dressing in a uniform would be enough. But it's just clothes. His face is famous, and he didn't think it through. Cayman asked her not to stand in the hallway and suggested going into the living room. There were a lot of eyes here. He just needed to change places. They went into another room, closed the door and asked not to be disturbed. The guy asks what she wants from him, and the girl wants to ask what he is doing here and why he was hiding from her. She remembers that he was supposed to appear in the second part of the original, but the content apparently changed. Then I thought, maybe this is not the Emperor, but I looked closer and his appearance seemed identical to the description. Cayman was surprised that she said this out loud, and then he realized that the girl definitely knew him, but she didn't know him by sight, only by description. Then she pinned him against the wall, started treating him like a servant, probably forgot who she was talking to. After that, she asked him if he had accidentally fallen in love with her at first sight, because he likes shameless and bold women like her. She also touches his face very boldly, but he tolerates it, and even said that she is right, but only half. He likes a different kind of courage, not like hers, but like Liana's. This look of a person who is sure that she will definitely be loved. This arrogant attitude, as if she sees right through the person she met for the first time. Cayman took her hands away from him and asked her to move away if she had said everything, because he felt uncomfortable. She didn't think he would get so angry. She regretted being brave and already acting differently. The guy wanted to tell her something else, but the door opened and he heard his name. Liana came to them, asked what they were doing there together and why they asked not to be disturbed. He runs up to her and explains that it's a misunderstanding and that he can explain everything. The guest said that she should have come later. They were busy now, and because of her, their conversation was interrupted. Liana replied that the saint, even in this situation, blames everyone but herself, to which the girl replied that she had been called that for a long time and that she was no longer a saint. Liana remembered out loud that the girl had not received recognition from the temple, so she really shouldn't be called a saint. The girl thought that they were trying to hurt her and warned that she would not succeed. Then she suddenly got angry, accused Liana of provoking him by pestering her husband and asked for an apology. Liana is outraged. She reminded that she had just pushed her fiancé against the wall and that it was not she who should apologize. Then she laughed at how anyone could even think that she still had feelings for David and asked him to stop being jealous of him with everyone. Cayman says that the crown princess is wrong. He supported his girlfriend and asked her not to say such things again. The princess asked again if Liana had any interest in her husband, to which the girl replied that she had been trying to prove it to her from the very beginning. The lady laughed. She only now realized that she hadn't heard her all this time. And after they figured it out about David, she wanted to know if these two were engaged and when they managed to do it. She doesn't believe it, but it doesn't matter anymore. And Liana thought, who is she to say that? It's not even her business. The princess asked to hurry up and give her some room. She wants to lie down and relax for an hour. Then she lay down on the sofa, warned that she would stay there for a day, and did not ask if anyone objected. Liana and the guy didn't say anything to her. They froze in one place, looked at each other, and rolled their eyes. They can't stand this man here anymore. The girl won't stand it any longer. But the emperor is still holding on. Liana said that she is not the owner, so she cannot allocate a room. This question should not be addressed to her. The princess decided to ask the owner, but came and said that the lord would not be happy to see her. So he asked her to leave before things got worse. She didn't like being treated like that. She asked to call the lord immediately, otherwise she would stay here for a week. Liana called 2 assistants, asked them to throw her out of the house immediately, and that was the end of it. The princess screams throughout the house that they will regret this, but she doesn't scare anyone with this. She was thrown out of the territory, and the security was ordered not to let her in next time, no matter what. Grandma came up and said that they did everything right. There was no need to put up with these antics, and she would have done exactly the same. After that, she remembered that she wanted to ask what that was just. The servants' uniforms on the stone. So he explained that he pretended to be one of them to see who had come to visit them, but he didn't plan to go to the living room. It was her idea. He told how the princess called his name and started asking questions as if he was a naughty child. Liana doesn't understand how she knew about him. He is also interested in this. That's why he tried to find out what brought her here. And he also remembered and immediately told how she grabbed him and started saying something incomprehensible like the original and the secondary part. Plot. I became a saint in another world. Prince David gradually falls in love with the cheeky charm of Kang Sena, who was an ordinary schoolgirl in a southern school. Liana Pond, who was already engaged to the prince, bullied Kang Sena, who became an eyesore, but eventually got her marriage annulled, after which Sana married the prince and the story ended happily. That is the story of the original work. The fact that Sena used the term original means that she got into the book. Now it is clear why she reacted like that. The main character who was supposed to fall in love with her is engaged to the villain. From the point of view of Sena, who knows the original, she could not believe it. Liana begins to fear that if the plot changes, her relationship with the emperor may change too. The guy saw that she was lost in thought, asked her to come back to reality and reminded her that they were together and everything was fine. In response, she asked not to come too close to the princess, so she would feel calmer. He was glad that she was jealous of him. Liana was angry that he said this and wished that he could be in her place for at least a minute. Kamen promised that he would be careful and that she would not see him with other girls, and if this happens, it will not be his initiative. Liana is still very upset. She is afraid of losing him, and he does not understand this. I became a saint in another world. Part 2. Sena spent happy days with the crown prince, until one day she became the owner of the Sword of Self-Love. This event led to a love triangle with the cold, handsome Emperor Kamen, who came in search of the ball. A few months later, Sena doesn't understand why Kamen is showing up so late, since 2 years have passed since the wedding. Then she realizes that he definitely came to look for the sword, and if she gets it, then everything will be fine. Grandpa is thinking about how she can get this sword, but first she needs to find out where it is. After that, something happened to her. She got angry that everything was changing quickly. Many moments were not in the plot, and it irritates her. The assistant had already gotten used to this. They came to calm her down and offered her a cup of calming tea. One of them says that now that Madam is the crown princess, it is wrong to run after someone. You need to be calmer and more restrained. Sina immediately got out of bed. She lit up and thanked them for their support. She is sure that one way or another she will succeed, because she is the main character and should be happy. The evening came. The girl meets the Lord. She learned that they have a common goal and told him that she has a request. Meanwhile, the Emperor is in the living room with Liana. He doesn't understand why his ear has been itching since yesterday evening. The girl suggested that it could be dust from a fire, but he washed everything thoroughly, and that couldn't be it. After that, she offered to clean his ears and began to approach him with a smile, without even noticing it. Grandma came up to them. She sees that happiness is flowing like a river, and asked if it was time to kiss. She embarrassed them so much that they asked her to leave the room and not say anything like that again. The Emperor does not understand how she can so easily reproach them for not having kissed yet, because it is none of her business. The woman decided to go check the agave. She hadn't been to the greenhouse for a long time and hinted that they should listen to her advice. The guy was already all red. He also wanted to go outside, but his grandmother stopped him and asked him not to ruin the moment. If he doesn't understand anything, she told him that she wants to help and that she's not actually going to the greenhouse, if he hasn't figured that out yet. The woman has long dreamed of seeing them kiss, but these two always act like teenagers who are afraid to touch each other. She's tired of watching it, so she always speaks directly and tries to do everything she can even now. They were lucky. An anchor knocked on the door. The guy let him in. He was just in time. This is the same lord that Sina was talking to when the emperor asked if the girl had left for the capital. The man said that she wanted him to ask to take her into the empire. Cayman doesn't understand what she's thinking. She's the crown princess from another country. And how can she want to be treated like a guest? The man says it doesn't look like it. He doubted she could have such thoughts. He says that as the emperor assumed, she knows him, the lord. But the information that she has the ability to see the future is unreliable. The Sword of Pride has an owner, but according to her, she will soon become its master. The lord also noticed that she was constantly saying something like some stories, a plot and some parts of a novel. She also addressed the stone as if it were a hero of some novel and talked about the original. The guy is sure he is close to solving what is wrong with her, but he needs to get to know her better. The only thing that calms him down is that the girl doesn't know that Liena is the very swordmaster she's looking for. The emperor asked to tell her that they would fulfill her request. She said that she would follow him, then she would not go anywhere. The lord doesn't like it. He thinks it will lead to problems. She is the crown princess and the symbol of the kingdom's prosperity. And if strange rumors appear, there will be trouble. A girl and her grandmother are walking around the area. She tells her how good the stone is, and the woman says that if she continues to put him above herself, nothing will come of it. A husband is a husband, not a child. She really wants her granddaughter to learn to love and value herself more than any man in this world. Otherwise, she will be unhappy all her life. Liena thanked her and said that she knew it, but didn't think it was that serious. The woman starts talking about her youth. Once she gave herself completely to her beloved and regretted it very much. But when I started to value myself and love myself more than him, life got better. She realized that men feel that a woman begins to depend on him, and this cannot be allowed. Then they remembered the plant. It grows very well. At this rate, the agave will reach the ceiling of the greenhouse. Grandma warned that if necessary, she would blow off the roof, but no one would dare touch the plant. She even said that the plant is like a child to her. She will make the best conditions for it and will not allow anything to happen to it. That agave is the only thing she brought when she planted it. Liena wonders if she thinks about her husband when she looks at the agave. In the past, the woman looked pleased when she mentioned the greenhouse. The girl can't fully understand her grandmother's feeling. She can tell that she really loved him. She likes to notice this shining look. With agave, the woman herself blossoms, just like this plant. Liena wants to love someone so deeply and strongly, and for it to be mutual. Meanwhile, the girl decided to work. She lured her assistant with food because she couldn't cope without her. Today, the weather is great. She is in a good mood, and this is a great reason to make this day productive. She didn't notice. She was just talking to the sword. Lewis was distracting her on purpose because he was bored. He starts to show what he's capable of, but nothing happens. Lewis is just deceiving her. He doesn't like it when she is busy and doesn't pay attention to him. The girl returned to work. She asked Lewis to turn into a plow because it was high time to plow the field. He told her that it was humiliating, but she was his master and he obeyed her. There are burnt watermelon remains and black dirt everywhere. The whole company is destroyed and it needs to be fixed. The girl is sure that if her father had started the fire with oil, she would have had to remove all the soil, but she was lucky. There is still no oil in this world, so they use natural oils like whale oil or olive oil. So the impact of the oil itself on the soil was not as big as she thought. They did a great job. The girl thanked the helpers. They almost cleared all the soil. That was all they could do. Now, all that remains is to trust the soil's natural ability to cleanse itself. The assistant is upset that there is nothing to do. She does not like to rest and asked if she could help with something else. Liena, that this is not field work, but if she wants it so much, the girl can ask her for one favor. There is something she wants to do at home, and in the meantime, the princess's assistant begs the lady to come back. She tells her that the knight cannot be trusted, but the girl has already made her decision and is heading to the empire. The assistant reminded that the relationship between the kingdom and the empire leaves much to be desired, and it is not a place to go just because of a desire. The princess said that she learned that the emperor himself wants to return to her, and she is sure that she will definitely be welcome there. Early in the morning, Lord Anchor came to her and said that if she was really going to the empire, then he can come to the training ground of the Lord's castle until the sun rises above that tree. He trusts her, so he is personally ready to take her to the empire. The woman is outraged. She thinks that this is some kind of trap and everything can't be so easy. The girl yelled at her and asked her to just follow her. Otherwise, she would stay here and not see anything interesting. She already sees how she gets the sword in her pride. Like in the original story, the emperor falls in love with her, and then everything will go as it should, as she wanted. The servant does not understand why the crown princess decides to leave her wealth and power to go to the empire. Instead, she must try to win the heart of Prince David. The girl left a note that she would go to the sanctuary for a short while. The prince threw the piece of paper away because he was sick of her handwriting alone. He asked to bring Liena to him. The assistant promised that he would do it in half an hour. The guy wants to apologize to her. He likes her even when she's offended, and Sana is already annoying when she's not around. When he first saw her, she seemed more like a plant to him than a person. And now, she attracts him more than his own, and he doesn't hide it. He wants to believe that she will come to him. David smiles and already really wants to see her. The guy wants to apologize to her and hopes that maybe she won't be able to stand it and will forgive him, and their relationship will get better. The assistant bursts in. He shouts at the whole house and says that he has terrible news. A notice of territorial changes came from the empire. It has the emperor's seal on it, and for them it is very bad. He said that they say that Lady Aureliano, Lord Poston, before her death decided to return his empires. The guy thought that she was the grandmother of the current emperor. Initially, Poston was part of the empire, but when the lady received this territory, the kingdom did not lose anything and simply prevented it. Moreover, then they promised to fully guarantee her position. In fact, if she wants to return the post of the empire, no one will be able to prevent it. The prince thought that she had severed all ties with the empire after the divorce, but the agreement was still in force. If the woman personally expressed a desire, then there were no objections. The assistant added that the notification of territorial changes was also accompanied by a notification of engagement. The guy asked why the emperor of a great power would send them something like that. He no longer needs any permission to marry. And then I wondered if it could be that the future empress was someone from their kingdom, and the assistant saw that something was written about it there. They realized that the emperor was marrying Liena, which was terrible news for David. He tensed up and started laughing to hide how much it bothered him. Then he thought that the girl's father, this sly fellow, would never refuse the position of the queen's father. Once he marries her, he will strengthen his political position. The Duke of Pond is not the man to miss such an opportunity. The assistant couldn't believe it either, but he showed the letter and asked to see it with his own eyes. Duke Pond. Tina brought troops into Poston's territory and started a fire. Although it turned out that this was an unfortunate coincidence, caused by a misunderstanding that Poston was holding his daughter hostage, Poston, fearing for the safety of the inhabitants, asked the empire to intervene. In addition, Duke Pond agreed to marry his daughter, Lady Liena, to Emperor Cayman Marshal, and would travel to the empire to lead their alliance. All this means that the Duke betrayed the prince. He acted in a way that was beneficial to him as usual. The guy nervously squeezed the piece of paper in his fist and began to hate this man even more. After this, he ordered that soldiers be sent immediately to Poston and not allow this emperor to take the Liena for himself, to which the assistant replied that due to past connections with the imperial family, Poston had a connection with the empire. The lady has probably already left the capital. They won't have time to find her and don't know where she might be. Finally, David said that he would not allow a marriage between Liena and the emperor. She would only be with him. His Majesty went out for a walk. There was a beautiful view outside. He hadn't seen such an idol for a long time. Everyone is working. Everything around is clean and well-groomed. Watching this, his heart is filled with peace. Now he thinks that earlier, being an emperor, he knew that the country is based on the work of many people. But to see all this with his own eyes is something else. Before that, he did not realize the value of their work. Perhaps a huge power makes people forget about such simple and peaceful things, which is the reason for people's deprivation. Some girl came up to him and asked if he had come by chance to see Liena. He replied that he was looking for his sister and asked if she knew a cheerful girl with short blonde hair and freckles. The girl said that she saw her enter Liena's house and could take him there. During the day, she worked with them in the field. But even after plowing such a huge area, she was still full of strength. The guy was surprised that Susan was capable of this. The girl was called by her mother. The emperor thanked her for her help and asked her to hurry so that no one would worry about her. They said goodbye. She smiled at him and said that she wanted to meet him again someday. He's already knocking on the door, asking if anyone is home or not, asked him to wait a few minutes, forbade him to come in. Then she opened the door, allowed him to enter, but it looked like she was hiding something from him. Came and asked what she was doing. Why couldn't he come in right away? She tells him that she has a proposal for him, which she has been preparing for a very long time. Liana proposes to marry her. She gives him flowers and says all the words very quickly because she is afraid of forgetting something. The girl promises to take care of him, that he will be happy with her, and offers to live happily ever after in great love. Doesn't understand what's going on. He expected anything from her, but not this. Everything looks like some kind of joke. His sister comes up to them, tells them that they need to take this bouquet now and agree immediately. They prepared all this for him together. He smiled and said that it was unexpected. He had never been given flowers before, especially not by girls. He already liked everything very much. The dining chair where their knees would touch. The bed that would be too tight if they both lay on it. But it didn't sound very good. His sister got angry and asked him not to complain, because that was all they could do. They didn't have millions like he did. Liana didn't notice any of this. She brought the marriage contract and smiled so much that her cheeks would soon hurt. His Majesty can't believe his eyes. He never thought that a girl would propose to him. She saw how surprised he was. She was sure that he was struck by her determination. Came and asked his sister to immediately send a message to the priest so that he could perform the wedding ceremony. His sister couldn't believe her ears. She wanted it to work out, but she didn't think it would be so easy. In the post, they don't do that. But for the sake of his future wife, he wants to create memories that will last a long time. Susan admires the bride and groom. This is exactly what she has been waiting for a long time. In the end, marriage traditions are quite simple. They don't have a wedding. They just decorate the house beautifully for the newlyweds. Propose and sign a marriage contract, so the girls did everything. But the emperor decided to do better and arrange a whole wedding for her sake. He says that he would like to start living with her right now, but he needs time to move his things and offers to let her stay in the Lord's castle. And when the priest arrives, they will sign the contract and hold the ceremony. Liana didn't think that everything would turn out like this. She was just planning to get married and live together. But he still wants it for real. She was very scared. She doesn't have a dress. She needs to prepare for the ceremony. It's all too unexpected. Time passed. They met with Grandma, came to see how the agave was doing, and today, it blossomed even more. The girl says that soon they really will have to tear down the roof because the plant is getting bigger and bigger. They started making a wish, and Liana asked him to make a wish and not think that these were some kind of children's games. He wished that in 10 years they would still admire this flower as they do now. It turned out that they have absolutely the same desires, but they don't know it. After that, the girl asked her grandmother to make a wish, but she said that it was not necessary. Because all her wishes have already come true, she is already happy and she doesn't need anything else. Susan comes in. She wants to get some work with a shovel. Last time it helped her relieve stress. Liana upset her. All the work is already finished. There's nothing else to do. The only thing that can be thought of is to check the bees in the forest. They make their honey. Sometimes you need to check if the hive has been disturbed by hornets or other enemies. Susan understood why the girl cooks so many sweets. Even though it turns out to be very expensive, she still can't deny herself this. Liana decided that since they were talking about it, she needed to go right now. She said goodbye to her fiancé and asked him not to be bored. He asked her to wait, said that there could be dangerous animals in the forest and suggested that they go together. Right now, he noticed that they were already outside of Poston's domain and asked if she was sure that this was the right path. She explained that to cut down trees inside the estate, you need the Lord's permission, and if beekeeping fails, you will have to cut down trees, so she specifically chose a place away from the estate. Next season, she wants to move the hives closer to the fields, so it will be easier for us to pollinate the plants. The guy said that it was a very good idea. It was too open here. He was already worried that if this forest was included in the borders of the empire, it would improve the defense. He was glad that he came here and realized this. Meanwhile, the girl remembered that she didn't ask Louis what wish he made. He said that he wanted him and his master to be happy and for them to always be together. Liana promised that next time she would also make a wish for him, because this time she somehow didn't think about it. They walked a little more, when suddenly a stone came underfoot and the lady stumbled. She was caught by a stone and told to watch her step, although he could have not said it. She didn't like it. She told him that she was not a child and there was no need to teach her. The guy laughed. She just misunderstood him, and to make amends, he offered to carry her in his arms. Louis starts screaming. He says he won't tolerate this because if the girl is in his arms, then he will be too. Came and asked him what he didn't like. Louis got embarrassed and said that they just misheard. The sword turned around. He started crying, and in general, he doesn't like that there is so much attention to him. His Majesty decided to rectify the situation. He said that he would like to make peace because now they will see each other more often. Louis flew very far away. As soon as he heard something about friendship, he felt uneasy. The sword wanted to be alone. He hid behind some bush, and the girl told the groom that he would be back soon. He just needed to get used to the fact that he was very emotional and easily offended. And also, he was not used to new people. Louis is not happy that his mistress will be with this man. He would like to see him less, but must always accompany his mistress. When the boy took it in his hands, he remembered again what it meant to live, realized what it meant to be a sword. After that, he had terrible thoughts that if he had stayed in the empire, then Cayman could have become his master. And then he calmed down, because he was the symbol of the emperor. For the sake of possessing him, endless battles for the throne would have begun. There was no guarantee that Cayman would have become the emperor and his master. Then he thought that he needed to go back. They were still waiting for him, and Lena was already a little worried. Cayman says that they have already come a long way, suggested to rest. He will now look around, and she can go to Louis and calm him down. The girl had already approached him. She asked if everything was okay and said that she came herself. The sword immediately calmed down. He said that he was disgusted to walk with that man and that he did not want to see him anymore. She understands that it is very easy for him. She would behave exactly the same way. But Louis will have to accept that now the emperor will be more in their lives. She really wants them to become friends. And Louis replied that it would be easier for him to go into space than to talk to that person. Then he wanted to change the topic. Suddenly began to talk about how a great sword is born in. You have to temper the metal hundreds, even thousands of times, hit it with a hammer until it acquires its true form. If you just melt iron and pour it into a mold, it will break easily. And when Louis was created, it took a very long time. So when he was made into a simple ceremonial sword and hung on the wall, he became silent. He did not want to talk to the owner who did not see his true value. He says he was tired of defending marshals who didn't even understand who he was. That's why Louis left his old master and wandered the world, hiding his true identity in search of a new master who would realize his value, and here he found him. Here the girl wondered if she understood its value correctly. It seemed to her that she did not fully understand it. At that moment, he turned away from her again and walked away, and she didn't understand what he didn't like this time. It turns out that a stone just came up to them. He was surprised that she was alone and asked where the sword was. Pride. She replied that Louis hadn't come to his senses yet, and the guy asked if she thought that since he went to save her with him, he had started to behave very strangely. They heard some strange sound, stopped moving to understand what it was. The girl asks what it could be, and he asks her to hold on to him. It could be a monster. A huge purple bird flew past. At first, they didn't notice anything. Then Liana heard a familiar voice, looked closely, and got very scared. The bird was holding Louis, and it was unknown where it would fly away with him. The girl tells the groom that a monster bird has kidnapped Louis, and he urgently needs to be rescued. If the guy does this, Louis will surely be grateful to him and won't be able to be angry with him anymore. They decided to hide deep in the forest so that they could not be seen from the sky. Hid in the bushes, and were so lucky that the bird landed right next to them. Cayman asked Liana to stay here. He will try to pull out the sword, and as soon as the bird lets go of Louis, she will need to grab him and run away from here. He started to attack this bird, took out his sword, and the girl didn't even have time to stop him and tell him how dangerous it was. The bird got very angry. She snatched the sword from him and let Louis go herself. He saw him nearby and shouted for the girl to grab him quickly. She ran up very quickly, trying not to look at the bird because if she looked at it, nothing would work. It would get scared and run back. At that moment, she raises her head and sees that the monster is trying to grab Cayman right by the head with its huge paws. She flaps her wings so hard that no one can stand on their feet. Liana quickly got her bearings. She threw Louis to the groom so that he could defend himself. And after that, she ordered Louis to unite with Cayman, no matter what insults. Now the guy will be able to reveal the full potential of this sword. He just needs to agree and let himself be used. His Majesty asked him what he thought about it, but he didn't answer and remained silent. The Emperor took this as consent, took the sword in his hand and awakened a special power in it. They both focused on their opponent. He is very dangerous, but there is no other choice. Now, one of them will win and stay alive. A couple of seconds passed. He did it so skillfully that the bird didn't even have time to harm them. She fell on the floor. It was very loud, but it was the sound of victory, which everyone really liked. It was the easiest fight in his entire life. Liana didn't even have time to admire her fiancé. He was so agile and fast. She can't believe he took down a huge monster with one blow. It was amazing. The girl congratulated Lewis for finding someone who truly appreciates his potential. She didn't understand why he was so depressed all this time, but when she saw him glow in the hands of Cayman, she understood everything. He just lacked the ability to be useful to someone. Lewis is silent because he doesn't want to admit it. And then something happened that even his mistress did not expect. Lewis approaches the guy, turns to her, and says that from this day on he wants to be his sword. That is, he wants to change his master. Liana isn't exactly angry, she's just outraged. What was all this hysteria about if in the end he wanted to become his sword? Louis justifies himself by saying that it happened somehow unexpectedly. He really hated him up until that moment. But now he felt that he liked him better with Cayman. Then he asked her not to be offended, although in fact, Lena is only happy about this. She wants to see everyone happy, and if this requires such changes, then she is not against it. She said he was an outstanding sword, so it was only natural that he would want to serve a worthy owner. If there is someone who can truly reveal his potential and whom he is ready to trust, then she will gladly give up her place. It would be a pity if the sword's potential remained unrealized. Lewis promised that even though his master would now be another person, he would protect her too. And after that, he almost cried that he had betrayed her. Meanwhile, His Majesty asked if it could be considered that he recognized him as his master, to which Louis replied that not yet, and then intimidated him. Allegedly, he could still change his mind and everything depended on his behavior. And here the most interesting part begins. Lewis has a question for him, after which it will become clear whether he wants to become his assistant or not. The question sounds like this. His goal, to get the sword, is almost achieved, and does this mean that now he no longer needs Lianio? It looks like a trap, Lewis asks. What is more important to him, his goal or his bride, who will soon become his wife? He needs to choose one of the two. The girl was outraged that he was asking such a tricky question, as if she herself was not interested in knowing what her fiancé would answer. Louis said it was very important he had to ask, and now it was better for her not to interfere. At that moment, Liana admitted to herself that she had had similar thoughts. But since she and the guy had become close, she had tried not to think about it. Or rather, she had simply avoided the topic, because it would hurt her much more than David's betrayal. Suddenly, Cayman replied that he treated her well, solely because of the sword of pride. From the very beginning, he felt uneasy with her. The girl already understood what he meant. She cries because she doesn't want him to continue talking further. She doesn't believe that she's hearing something like this from him. She wipes away her tears, and there are more and more of them. It turned out that she was just worried for nothing, because he then went on and said that he had originally only noticed her because of Lewis, but then he got to know her better and felt that he wanted to live with this girl for the rest of his life, and he would not exchange her for anything, not for any sort of pride. Now everything is different. Now he understands that his path led him to her, to the girl who became the meaning of life for him. Cayman can't live without her. He hugged her and said that if he had to choose one person, then he would choose her. Liana literally melted after such words. He began to wipe away her tears and reminded her, as he had already said, that he would never exchange her for anything. After that, she got angry at Lewis, who made her nervous. She deliberately got offended at him so that he would apologize and understand that he shouldn't do that. The sword asked to be allowed to inform him that from this day on, His Majesty, the Stone Marshal, would become its master. He explained that it was a test. If the guy chose the sword instead of his bride, he would lose both. Then Lewis promised to make the boy proud that he became his master. Cayman took him in his hand, when suddenly, the sword warned that as soon as the guy betrayed Liana, he would immediately take revenge on him and return to her as his mistress. The girl asked what they were whispering about. She began to feel superfluous and very angry. After that, she reminded that time is running out. We need to go get honey. But before that, we need to put on protective clothing. Liana shows wooden boxes. These are hives where bees live, and there are a lot of them. They only have one suit. The girl put it on and asked everyone else to move away. It's better not to come here without a suit. It shows that this year the bees have tried hard. There is much more honey than last year, and this is very good. Liana said that honey in the comb is much tastier than the other and suggested that we definitely try it. But that would be a little later. In order not to stand idle, the guy decided to check the area for monsters so that they wouldn't attack her. The girl thanked him, it would make her feel much calmer, and she continued cleaning. They already talked to Lewis about the need to arrange a new check. The girl laughed and said that this was too much. The groom came back. He checked everything. There are no monsters nearby, and there is no need to worry that someone will attack them. After that, she asked him to help. They don't have a knife, so they'll have to divide the honeycombs by hand. He tells her that she shouldn't spill such precious honey on the ground. She needs to be more careful. He started licking the remains of honey on her hands, and she realized that it wasn't about the value of the honey. He just wanted to do it. She asked him to stop. She was very embarrassed. Lewis was nearby and he was looking at it. Kamen loves sweets very much. He says that he would do this every day. Everything tastes better from her hands. They took each other's hands and started looking at each other. Lewis drew their attention to himself and reminded them that it was time to go back. It was getting dark outside and he didn't like to stay out late. Liena remembered that their grandmother was waiting for them. She wanted to try the honey and they couldn't return empty-handed. The guy says that they were going to move into their new little house, and if they go there, they will only waste their time. The girl didn't understand how he was going to move to a place where nothing was ready yet, and he explained that he had taken care of it before leaving, and now everything was already done there. She thought that they would move there only after the wedding, but he did everything so quickly that she felt very awkward. The girl doesn't even want to think about how much he spent on it. Well, if he wanted it himself, then that's great. She never ceases to admire him, and is increasingly convinced that this is the man she wants to marry. They have already returned home. She looks at this house and cannot believe her eyes. It seems like some kind of dream. In front of her is a completely different house. When they left, it wasn't so beautiful here, but now she just wants to admire it. The guy says he changed everything a little here. She said, "It's not much at all, but almost everything." He changed not only the facade, but also the entire interior. It became much more comfortable. The girl is crazy about what she sees in front of her. He sat in a new living room, kitchen, bought dishes. He wants to move in and live here happily for the rest of his life. In the bathroom, too. Everything has changed. Everything is new, clean, shiny. Everything inside her tightened, but not from anxiety, but from the fact that he did it for her sake. Kamen said that a whole group of builders had been working here all this time, and at an accelerated pace. The girl entered the room, saw a new bed. Kamen said that he didn't like it the most. It was small, so he chose a bigger one. He became embarrassed when his bride asked why they needed more space, and then remained silent as if he hadn't heard anything. She understands perfectly well why a bigger bed is needed, laughed and said that it was very thoughtful. After a hard day in the forest, he offers to go wash, offers her to go first, and he will prepare firewood. Liena is glad that he thinks everything through in advance, makes the best conditions for them, and does not spare money for this. After it got dark outside, they lit a fire and set aside a special place for Louis. He said that this corner would be ideal for him to guard the mistress and the master. It was time to rest. The guy said he would leave as soon as she fell asleep, and she had already thought about herself that they would sleep together. It seemed to her that since he had changed the bed to fit together, he would join her and not sleep in any other place. She thought that he was also tired, no less than she was, and decided to tell him to rest too and not wait for anything. At this point, they thought she had already fallen asleep. Louis wanted to talk to the owner and asked if he could ask a question. He wants to know what he likes about her so much, why he does so much for her, and Liena hears all this. The guy was embarrassed. He even turned around to see if she really didn't hear anything. The owner admitted that he fell in love with her at first sight, but now, in order to open up to her completely, one thing prevents him: the doubt of how mutual it all is. Liena didn't expect to hear this. All this time she had the same question, and now she found out that he still loves her. She was so happy that she almost moved, but she calmed down in time. They didn't notice anything. Their conversation continues. The guy asks Louis if the girl told him what she thinks about him, and if she is ready to accept him as he is. The sword replied that he knew everything and never doubted the love of his mistress. He said that if she agreed to become his bride, she had feelings. Otherwise, none of this would have happened. He asked him not to disappoint Liena, because if he finds out that the girl is unhappy, the guy will be in trouble. Kamen thought that he needed to be more decisive, especially since he had already found out for sure that their feelings were mutual. The guy says that he wants to surprise her every day, and as long as he has the opportunity, he will do it. And she could no longer restrain herself, turned to the other side to face them, and just at that moment the groom turned to look at her. He got scared when he saw her looking at him and then asked how much she heard. She replied that she hadn't slept for a second, after which she asked him not to worry and admitted that she was very pleased to hear all this. After that, The girl answered the question that had been tormenting him all this time. She said that she loved him more than anyone in the world. He dreamed of hearing these words from her. It was a very exciting moment. His hands even started shaking. The guy can hardly look her in the eyes. At first, he regretted saying too much, but now he is glad that they figured everything out. She came closer to him, took his hands, asked him to relax, and said that she was also nervous, but there was no point in it now. They are open to each other, especially since they will soon be husband and wife, which means they should feel comfortable with each other like no one else. Kamen couldn't hold back. He hugged her very tightly. After that, he asked why he was so happy and why he had such a beautiful girl, whom he had been waiting for his whole life. She replied that in return, he simply had to love her and make her happy, and she would do the same. Liena asked him not to try to look perfect for her. She loves and will love him as he is. Kamen promised her that he would be the best husband for her and would never hurt or harm her. He kisses her and finally did it, without embarrassment and at the same second as he wanted it. There is a very pleasant atmosphere around. The fireplace gives coziness. They hug each other. It couldn't be better. The guy hugs the girl very tightly. She asks him not to let her go, and this is the best thing he has heard in a long time. Kamen happily fulfills this request and again says that she is the best girl in this world. He looks into her eyes and thinks that the worst thing that can happen now is if he suddenly wakes up and this turns out to be a dream. He also said that he wanted to drown in her eyes and how good it was that now he would see them more often. At this point, Louis ruined everything. He says that he is happy for them, but thinks that there is no need to rush into all this. He is not yet ready to let his mistress marry and is not going to see how all this could end. Kamen calmed Liena down and promised that he would put Louis somewhere else so that he wouldn't bother her anymore. For example, into the living room or somewhere further away, into the corridor so that he wouldn't see or hear anything. After that, they wished each other good night. After all, it was already late and time to rest. Meanwhile, the emperor's uncle comes to his house. The man wants to talk to him but finds out that his majesty is busy now. He starts to get indignant, shouts at the whole house, and doesn't understand that the emperor's assistant won't help him in any way. He believes that a nephew should meet his uncle even when he is very busy. They are still relatives. He recently learned about the upcoming wedding from the newspapers and it really hurt him. The man asked his assistant what she thought he felt at that moment when he learned about it, not from him personally. The girl doesn't understand how to explain to him that she won't help him in any way. He distracts her and doesn't let her do her job. Now, Uncle is the second candidate in line for the throne. Obviously, he doesn't like the idea of an heir appearing. At that moment, the assistant decided to remind him that the man, although an uncle, was a subject of the emperor and had burst in here without warning, and was also demanding the impossible. He seemed not to hear her, and began to ask how one could marry a girl from another kingdom, although it was neither her nor his business. She told him that if he had read the newspapers, he knew perfectly well that the bride was a noble lady from the Duke's family, and that she was supported by Madame Aurelian herself. After that, she asked how he dared to doubt the choice of the former empress. Lady Aurelian had 3 sons. One of them was the father of Kamen and his sisters. The other, the Duke of Douglas, is a copy of his father, a greedy and short-sighted man, completely unsuitable for the role of emperor. The man began to justify himself by saying that he never said that he doubted his mother, although he only said the opposite. The assistant says that if he came to His Majesty on this matter, then she cannot allow him to meet with him, and asks him to leave immediately. And finally, the girl asked him not to call her by name anymore. He didn't answer her, got offended, and went back to the carriage. The man concluded that everyone around the emperor had become different from what he knew them to be. He felt very uncomfortable communicating with this girl. Meanwhile, his assistant asks how everything went. Douglas replied that he was very unhappy. They had big problems, and something had to be done about it. He will never accept the fact that the guy is going to take the empress from another state. The man offered him different daughters of noble families, but in the end he chose who knows who. If this marriage takes place, the emperor's influence will become even stronger. In such a situation, it will be difficult for the uncle to increase the number of his supporters in the palace. His assistant says that since they have already started working on the documents, it means that the wedding will take place in the near future, and it is possible that they want to hold it quickly without unnecessary obstacles. The man thinks that since the information has leaked to the newspapers, everything has only become more complicated. He needs something worthwhile to turn the situation around, and after that he asked how the case he had assigned him to investigate was going. The guy replied that just today, the Informants Guild had provided something valuable. It seems that the sword of self-love rests on the western strait of Poston, right where the emperor and his bride now live. Everyone knows that this is the very place where dozens of people die every year due to violent storms. They say that extreme weather events in this area are connected with the sword. The gentleman said that it is quite possible because this sword is capable of using magic, and not only, now he has only one option left: to get this sword. If he can get it, then he will prove that he is worthy of becoming the emperor, due to the fact that the symbol of the legitimacy of power has disappeared. Some still doubt the abilities of the stone. He already thought about sending soldiers there to bring him this sword, but he is afraid that they might appropriate this sword for themselves, and one of them will become its owner. The assistant also thinks that it is very risky. Only if the sword ends up in the master's hands, only then will everyone take his side. Meanwhile, the next day came. Louis woke up earlier than everyone else and he was already bored. He looks at his mistress and sees that she looks beautiful, even in her sleep. The guy had also already woken up. He started looking at the bride. He was already thinking about making breakfast for her. There was nothing else to do anyway. He gently touches her hair, feels that everything is happening for the best. When he returns to the palace, they will only be able to meet her on certain days, so now it is worth enjoying these moments while there is such an opportunity. At that moment, he heard that someone had arrived. The count arrived. They hadn't seen each other for a long time and even missed each other. The man talks about how worried he was that everything would be okay with his fiancée, that they wouldn't quarrel and change their minds about getting married. Several other people came with him. The guy is glad to see them all. He thanked them for worrying so much and said that they were fine. The count reported that they had spoken with the royal troops stationed in the post. As far as he understood, they don't understand what's going on, because they're seeing it for the first time. They talked a little about their affairs, and of course, the assistants couldn't resist asking when the wedding would be. The guy promised that they would talk about it a little later, but now he wants to give some instructions. The nearest mountain should be included in the postiny. They tell him that it will be very problematic, and he asks if there is really anything impossible for them. The assistant says that the job is not easy, but if this is an order, then they will carry it out. He used his strength, gave it his all, and spared no effort. In the end, he succeeded. The gentleman praised him and promised him a bonus. It was a very good job. It was the first time he used magic on such a scale, and he was glad that he did not disappoint the master. The emperor does not hide the fact that if there were no master of earth magic in the empire, he himself would not have so easily thought about annexing lands due to physical obstacles. After that, the gentleman said that if any of the locals want to stay in the kingdom, no one should stop them. This is an order. And after that, he warned that he was going to stay here for a little while longer, so he asked not to expect him in the next few days. After that, everyone started asking him to introduce them to his bride. The guy started to think whether it was worth doing. The girl might not be ready, especially since she hadn't woken up yet. He told them that if they wanted it so much, they could come in the evening or another day. He doesn't want her to wake up and there will be a lot of strangers around. She might feel very awkward. The assistants understand everything. They apologized if it was impudent on their part. The guy replied that everything was fine, and they immediately rushed to hug him and said that he was the best gentleman. He was very pleased to hear this, but in the future, he warned them never to do this in public places. People might misunderstand this, and finally, one of them wanted to ask one question. Is the emperor sure that he will not change his mind and that he will really make Liena his wife? The guy said that he had already prepared everything. Everything was serious. He had already invited the priest, and if he had doubted her, he would not have tried to arrange a wedding in such a short time. The aides apologized for asking such a personal question and said they were so worried about him that they couldn't help but think about it.